What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast. Tremendous week of football we just saw. A lot of huge games, especially in the AFC. Tons of contenders playing against other contenders. We're going to talk about all of those games today. I don't even know where to begin because I feel like I'm coming down from a football high, especially if you watched that Browns and Ravens games. I mean, one of the best games of the year, if not the best game of the year. So I'm so jacked that December football is back. It's the best time of the year. Great week of football. EJ, buddy, how you doing? How you feeling? What's your big reaction to the games this week?
I'm feeling incredibly lucky. I almost didn't watch the Browns-Ravens game live. I was going to do some film work. Was going to put the script together for tonight. Did a bunch of things. I was like, nah, I should turn it on. I can work while it's on. So I turned it on at the end of the first quarter, and obviously that was a tremendous decision because game of the year candidate, pretty much as soon as it was over, you knew that was going to be in the running for game of the year. Just a really enjoyable football game. Sometimes doing all this work, I don't want to say we forget the fandom of football. We always enjoy looking at it. We always get jacked up by the big plays, but occasionally you just really get caught up in a game, whether or not it's your team, and just enjoy the hell out of it. And that was last night's Browns-Ravens game. So much fun. So feeling incredibly lucky. And again, late season football, we're starting to see the kicking game get a little screwy. We're starting to see the run matter a little bit more. Starting to see defenses tighten up on the goal line a little. We're getting down to brass tacks. We're getting down to the time that it matters and separating contenders from pretenders. And it's a great time of year. So I brought on a local beer. Always love it when I can do that. This is Narrows Brewing, really close to me here in Tacoma. And they have a Tacoma series of beers that they named after neighborhoods in Tacoma, Washington. And this is the Proctor India Ale. Proctor is a neighborhood right near where I went to college. And I love Narrows Brewing. I know the guys that started it. They make several tremendous beers, but I have not had this version of the Proctor India Pale Ale, so I am excited about that. And for my shot, I got some Pendleton Midnight because I ran out of Pendleton and was going to go get some more. And they were out of Pendleton, but they had Midnight. And I thought, well, that's just about the same thing. I like it just as much. So that's my shot of the week. What do you have?
I feel like Pendleton's got a sponsors at this point, right? I mean,
if we could get Pendleton or Jameson or, anything you like. Well, you've had people send you alcohol though, so that's close, right? You've had at least 2 distilleries send you alcohol. I'm still on the schneid for that, but I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if anybody knows anybody at Pendleton or Jameson, hook us up here because we're drinking them damn near every week. Give them free advertising.
We're supporting them. They should support us back.
Yeah. I have a little bit of something different. I've never had it in the pod. I've had this bottle for a while, but I've never had it in the pod before. That is High West American Prairie Bourbon Whiskey, which was a limited release. I think they did like a year or 2 ago, and I still happen to have the bottle, about half of it left. It's a blend of 3 different bourbons, a 2-year, a 6-year, and a 13-year-old bourbon, which, if you know anything about bourbon, 13 years old is very old for a bourbon. They usually do not last in the cask that long. Most bourbons you see out there are aged somewhere between, at least the high-end ones are aged somewhere between 10 to 12. Anything above 12 is kind of hard to get. So this was a blend with 13 in it. And so it's a little bit more, what's the word, clingy? It's got like a viscosity to it. It really lingers a long time. Super long finish. Very, very sweet. Lots of honey, lots of vanilla. Great sipper for this time of year just because it goes down so easy. I have no idea what the proof is, but I don't think it's that high. But if I start slurring uncontrollably, you know what it is. But love High West. I've actually
had it. This is a rarity. A lot of times, especially when you bring on rare things, I've not had it before. But I actually had a glass of that at a Christmas party about 2 years ago, and it was lovely stuff. I've not come across it since, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I can't wait to see what you think of it.
Yeah, High West makes phenomenal stuff. A lot of it's blends that they do. They kind of have a master distiller that specializes in blends, and every single one of their releases I've absolutely loved. I have 3 different bottles of them, and man, they do good work. But with that being said, EJ, why don't we get into kind of overall trends for this week before we dive into the individual games? Excuse me. What are some of the things that you noticed when watching all the games from this past Sunday and Monday that kind of stand out as themes among all the games?
Yeah, well, early in the year, we had some rough weeks for kickers. I don't know if it was the limited off season or just general rust, no preseason. There were 2 or 3 weeks at the beginning of the season where we noted that it was extremely rough for kickers. And then everybody pretty much leveled out and we had rough games for kickers. But league-wide, it seemed that we were pretty much back to the norm. We fell off that wagon a little bit this week. We had a lot of kickers miss a lot of kicks, both field goals and extra points. Case in point, both the Vikes and the Jets field goal kickers missed 3 field goals each. So that's 6 field goals missed in 2 games. Just 2 kickers missed 6 field goals. There were a multitude of other missed field goals and missed extra points. So that trend is kind of back. Weather's coming in. Not all those kicks were affected by weather. But yeah, it was a rough week for kickers again, and it affected the outcome of a few of those games. Not the Jets games so much, but certainly the Vikes would have been a little bit closer to the Bucs with 3 more field goals. One-handed interceptions. I can't remember. Usually if we have one-handed interception in a week, it is a notable play. It's on all the highlight reels. There were multiple one-handed interceptions this week in the same week. I can't remember that ever happening, so that stuck out quite a bit. And then big returns on special teams.
Tyus Bowser technically had one.
Oh yeah, I have to toot my own horn on that one. I had an elite tweet on that one because I said Ravens right now, and I got a GIF of Bowser waving his finger. I was like, and it came out within like 30 seconds, and I was like, "Come on, those are normally the things I think of like an hour later." But that one, the timing and the image combined, good stuff.
He's had 3 in the last 4 games, by the way, Tyus Bowser. And this one was a beautiful one-hander.
If you were watching that game and you were listening to Louis Riddick, he pulled it right up. He was like, this isn't the first time that he's had that, and they need to know that he'll drop in coverage. It's a great play by him. Flashed in and then dropped into the lane. Mayfield never saw him, and he ended up basically one-handing it, and then the return. Great play in what was a crazy game, so can almost get lost. But there were, 2 others besides that I can think of offhand. So just a really rare circumstance. We don't get to see that very often. And then lots of big returns on special teams. There were quite a few. There was a couple for touchdowns, and then lots of big returns, past midfield that set their team up in really good position. Not all those were game-turning plays, but certainly more big returns this week in a single week than I can remember in quite a while. So kickers having a rough week, one-handed interceptions, and big returns on special teams.
We're in December football when defense and special teams are the defining parts of an NFL week. I'll just say that. And I will add a few things to your kicker thing. Will Lutz, who almost never misses, missed 2. Which you could argue was kind of the defining factor in the Eagles upsetting the Saints. Parkey did Cody Parkey things and also missed a field goal and an extra point, which arguably turned the Browns-Ravens game. And the difference in that game, again, the Ravens had Justin Tucker, who drilled a 55-yarder game winner. If you don't have a good kicker, when the games really matter, you're kind of shit out of luck. That just is what it is in the NFL these days. But
yeah, Ravens with Tucker reminds me of like the Packers with Rodgers,
where you just know you're fine.
they don't like fans don't really worry. They're like, a little less than 2 minutes and like 60 yards to go. It's okay. It's Aaron, right? And again, on a night when it was really cold and people were slipping all over the field, traction was definitely an issue. And Tucker comes out to win, what has been arguably the game of the year with a ton of lead changes and a bunch of points and tons of high drama. They were like, I don't know. I think he's probably going to make it, right? I'm sure they were nervous, but not in the way that just about any other NFL fan base would be with their kicker out there. So
the Ravens might be the only team that when they're tied or down with a minute left, you don't think, oh, they left too much time for Lamar. You think, oh, they left too much time for Justin Tucker. That's what you think. Because you don't need as many yards when you have Justin Tucker. Like, a lot of teams, it's like, oh, we got to get to the 30. It's like, no, you get to the 40.
Yeah, 55 in, he's pretty automatic. One of the most accurate field goal kickers in NFL history. So I just think they get to worry a little bit less. So good for them. Not a bonus that we have, but it was interesting to see.
Why don't we get into the Shot of the Week winner from Week 13? A first for the Bootleg Pod. We actually have a tie.
A tie?
2 New Yorkers sharing the award this week. We got Jabril Peppers, who absolutely lit up Tyler Lockett on the boundary on a whole shot that Lockett did hang on to, by the way, but he sure paid for it. Jabril Peppers just murdered him, coming full speed to the boundary. And then Sam Darnold, believe it or not, drilling Jeff Heath into the ground on the goal line. Jeff Heath did get a concussion that game. I don't know if it was from that play specifically, but it wasn't even a dirty hit. Darnold just lowered his shoulder, and Heath got the worst of it. That's for damn sure. But yeah, tribute to both Jabril Peppers and Sam Darnold this week. I've got my shot. I got a Michter's American Whiskey here, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. It's basically their same bourbon mash bill, but technically to be called a bourbon by law, it has to be aged in new oak barrels. These are bourbon-soaked oak barrels, so they have to call it American whiskey, but it's damn good stuff. It's basically bourbon, but just a little bit sweeter because it's aged in bourbon-soaked barrels. But that's what I got. EJ, what do you have for your shot again? Is it Midnight?
Pendleton Midnight. And I don't know, a Giant and a Jet tying for anything? Is this feels like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters or something, or combining matter and antimatter. But no, great plays by both guys. A lot of fun with last week's Shot of the Week, and here's to both of them.
Cheers.
Ooh. Yeah, so we'll have some more of those this week, but this is the game that everybody marked on the calendar when we started Bootleg Football way back in the summer. We had people saying, I can't wait until the Texans and Bears play. Little did they know how the Texans and Bears would do this year. But people have been talking about this game and us talking about this game for months. So we couldn't not talk about it. As you know, I'm a Bears fan. And Brett is a closet Bears fan. That is his NFC team. And, of course, he is primarily a Texans fan. So you've got your two hosts opposed here. Their teams going at it. We have the subtitle or subcategory, sub-story is what I want to call it, of Watson and Trubisky coming out of the same draft. Did you know that happened? I'd never heard that before this game.
Wait, really? Oh, that's news to me.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah, somebody on my timeline said,
did the Bears pass on I
don't know.
Watson?
Apparently that's what I heard, but yeah. Anyways. No, I had somebody that on my timeline that said they just compared, Watson and Trubisky drink, and I was like, no. Don't do that. That's bad for your health. You'll die. They'll keep bringing it up, but wanted to talk about what worked for the Bears. Bears ended up winning this game, which was certainly not a sure thing. Neither of these teams have done particularly well this year, certainly have not played up to expectations. And the Bears came out and had a game that looked, I think, about as close to the blueprint as Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace laid out as we've seen this year.
Yeah.
Like, this was their plan. Right? They wanted big holes for David Montgomery. We saw that early in the game. Certainly helped set the Bears up with an early lead. Huge rush from David Montgomery. Don't typically see that kind of space. But tell us about that Texans run defense, Brett.
What I'll say about the overall, you can call it pacing, you can call it game script, about the Bears getting on top of the run game and then pinning the ears back and all that kind of stuff. Beyond the fact that the Texans defense is terrible, as I've said many times before, arguably the worst run defense in the history of this franchise, and that's saying a lot because we've had a lot of terrible run defenses. You want to talk about Reeder being gone, you want to talk about McKinney being hurt, you want to talk about the DBs not being able to tackle, you're down to backup corners everywhere that also can't tackle. This run defense is bad, but the thing that I want to give Nagy credit for, as you said, is they're going off the blueprint that they've wanted to do all season, which is actually getting the outside zone run game to work, because they don't have the horses inside to really make duo or inside zone work. Like, you actually have to be able to move people to get that to happen. But with outside zone, it's really more about walling off and just kind of letting Monty, work from hole to hole to hole and find his cutback lane. On that big touchdown run that was like, 82, 83 yards, somewhere around there in the first quarter, Zach Cunningham actually tried to backdoor through the backside A gap and just kind of left a hole wide open in the front side. So again, it was kind of both things where, like, yeah, the Texans' run defense is bad, but the fact that they were able to secure blocks on the front side to open up the front side of that hole to begin with, like on outside zone, which I don't think they've run enough this year. Like, that was what we've been waiting for 14 weeks is, oh my God, they can actually run outside zone. They're actually, throwing bootlegs off of that. They're hitting slide routes with the tight ends off of that. Like, it almost looked like they were the Texans offense, because the Texans do a lot of that stuff too, except the Bears just do it better in this game. They were managing Trubisky's reads, where again, it's a lot of half field stuff with play action. There were some screens, not a whole lot of taking deep shots down the field because they didn't have to. When you get man coverage looks with Allen Robinson in the slot, that was damn near automatic. He was destroying these DBs. Like, this was the best game that Matt Nagy has called in at least a year, which meant that it was the best game that Trubisky's played in a while, in my opinion, because he wasn't really put in any positions to make mistakes. The run game got going. Like, I get the Texans defense is awful. We all know that. But this was also a good performance by the Bears offense, and that to me is at least encouraging.
Yeah, they finally did what they wanted to, and they did it right. There were very few things that we have been calling for all season for them to do that they did not do. We called for them to play Cole Kmet more than Jimmy Graham. They did that. We called for them to rely on Jimmy Graham from the 20-yard line and in towards the end zone. They did that. They got his patented little post-up corner move. That's the one thing he's still really good at, and they got a touchdown out of it. They started off throwing to Robinson early. They didn't wait until they were behind to do that. They made sure to move Trubisky, lots of rolling pockets, half-field reads, and when they kept him in the pocket, they kept it to a very simple, and he's even been able to blow this in the past, the very simple A or B sort of instant RPO, right? Read this player and either let the ball go in the running back's gut or whip a slant, usually to Robinson off that slot, right? So it's A or B, and it really depends on the one player that's in between him and Robinson, right? What's he do? And watch that player and do the other thing. He's even managed to screw that up in the past, but if they kept him in the pocket, that's what he did, and he executed those very cleanly. There were at least 3 or 4 of them, and he made the right call each time, and that's not been the case going into it. So everything kind of rolled together. The interior of the offensive line for Chicago has solided up a little bit. Sam Mustipher has played out of his mind, a former undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame at the center spot, which allows Whitehair to be at guard, which is his more natural spot. Everything just kind of fell into place. Again, an early lead. The pass rush started to work. Pagano brought 5 and occasionally 6 guys, and that was enough for the Bears to come out of it with a victory. Now, look, you've said it. Texans are junk on defense. There's almost no wide receivers left, and they don't have a great running threat to keep Chicago honest. So don't get too excited about this, Bears fans, but it doesn't mean it wasn't encouraging. Both things can be true. It can be an encouraging game where they stayed on game plan and executed the way they wanted to. And yes, they played a team that was undermanned and is not great on defense in the first place. So don't get too high or too low about this one. But Cole Kmet also had a much better game. He led the tight ends in snaps, and he also is a Bootleg Shot of the Week nominee for taking a little screen and basically planting 2 Texans on his way to sort of being gang tackled like a water buffalo. But it's more than we have seen out of him that way. And it wasn't his only play of note in the game. So nice to see them finally backing up all the talk about, oh, Cole Kmet's amazing. We love Cole Kmet. We're going to play him a bunch. We're going to feed him a bunch. Hasn't really happened up to this point. His snaps have been increasing steadily for the last 3 or 4 weeks. But this was really a different game for him, and I think really encouraging for all the Chicago fans who are like, well, we picked this guy fairly high up in the second round, and he's done just about bubkiss. This was a game that let them see some of that potential moving forward with him as a sort of featured starting tight end.
He's a big man.
He's a huge dude.
He's
like
huge.
He moves like a much smaller dude. He's well over 260. And he's an imposing dude. Like, Trubisky's not a small guy, and when Cole Kmet stands next to Trubisky after they were celebrating after that little run, like, Kmet towers over Trubisky. He's a big dude. So,
but that play really convinced me. Again, just kind of seeing he was nominated for like Angry Runs of the Week on a Good Morning Football, and we'll throw a clip of that in the comments so people know what we're talking about. Again, it took 3 guys to get him down, and that play kind of convinced me that he can do that little kind of shovel screen that the Chiefs run with Kelsey inside, where they just kind of shovel it to Kelsey, and it's a short yardage play for them. But that convinced me. It's like, oh, okay, he's a powerful enough runner with the ball in his hands just because he's so damn big. You can actually do that. I kind of want to see them integrate that in the red zone, because even if he's not doing much else, if you could just get the ball in his hands when he's got a runway to get up to speed, he's so damn big, he's really hard to tackle. Jimmy's obviously the post-up threat. I'm not saying you take away Jimmy's receptions, but as kind of a change-up to that, if you're doing like 12 personnel or something like that, get him in motion.
They actually tried it earlier in the year.
Did they? I don't remember that.
That exact play. Well, no. That's why you don't remember it, is because Cole didn't handle the... A, it wasn't a great little shovel pitch, and B, he didn't handle it very well, so he stuttered at the point, and the one thing you can't do on that play is stutter at all. It's got to be a bang play. Yeah. It's got to get in your hands, and you got to turn and push. And the combination of it not being terribly accurate and him not handling it particularly well, he got stopped right where he basically touched it, sort of gummed up in the middle of the line. But they did try it, so they're, great minds. They're thinking the same way you were. And now that he's a little bit more comfortable and the game looks like it's starting to slow down for him a little bit, I'd love to see him try it again.
Overall for this game, I still think Nagy's going to get fired. I still think Pace is going to get fired. Like, they're not going to go to the playoffs.
Oh, you'd be surprised. You haven't been listening to Chicago Talk Radio this week.
Oh, God. It would be a mistake to keep them. I'll just say that, because they have a lot of talent on this team and they're doing nothing with it. But games like this, where you're playing against a vastly inferior opponent, and it pains me as a Texans fan to say that, they are a vastly inferior opponent, but games like this show that Chicago still has a lot of talent and enough talent to out-talent another team that doesn't have it, even when the coaching staff isn't great. You still have all those, Pro Bowl caliber guys on defense. You still have Allen Robinson. Offensive line's playing better. Monty, when he has space, is a good running back. Like, Jimmy's a good red zone threat. Like, you have guys. You have lots of guys that are good players on this team. And you can out-talent the Texans. But what I don't want is for a team out-talenting the Texans to totally somehow erase the other 13 weeks of the season where, even though they had all that talent, they weren't able to outcoach other teams. Like, this is the exception game, not the rule. And ultimately, I do think we're going to kind of go back to normal Bears football next week, as we've come to know and hate. And Nagy probably will be fired and Pace will be fired. But this is a good reminder that talent is not the problem. There's still a lot of good players on this team. You just need to get a new staff and have a good, solid draft to build depth. And Chicago can be right back in it again in 2021.
Yeah, you know what I fantasize about based on that?
Eric Bieniemy?
No, I just fantasize about this particular set of players under a guy like Stefanski or Shanahan, right? Guys that, Stefanski's got a boatload of talent. I would say even more talent than the Bears. The Browns are loaded after years of high drafts. The Niners, not as much, some of that, but, Shanahan and his staff, tons of injuries. Didn't hear him whining. They're still out competing, trying to put points up. They're competitive. They're still scaring people. They've lost tons of their top talent this year. They're without their starting quarterback, their best edge rusher, their all-world tight end. And, they're still doing it. Can you imagine what they would do with this roster? Because, look, this roster is, shorter on talent, say on the offensive line, than a place like Cleveland for sure. But it's not bereft of talent, right? There are players here that, with good coaching and a great scheme, you could see them doing more than they're doing. And that's what I think about is, man, if you could unlock some of that, this team would be somewhere in the middle as opposed to bouncing off the bottom, which is what it's been doing offensively all year. It's 31st or 30th in just about every offensive ranking. So, yeah, interesting game. Wanted to call out Deshaun Watson's ability to, I call it being a magician every week on this show. It's that ability to navigate a crummy pocket. There was a perfect example. The one passing touchdown they did have this week to Kiki QT never would have happened. Free rusher shows up in Deshaun Watson's face, and he dekes him to the ground with moves, never touches him, no stiff arm, nothing. Basically jukes him left, jukes him right. The defender's knees buckle. Basketball players call it breaking somebody's ankles. He basically breaks his ankles, rolls to the outside, and then throws an easy score to QT. That play doesn't happen pure and simple without Deshaun Watson's ability, and that ability to avoid the rush in the pocket and then do something productive is the best in the NFL right now. There is no one else that does it on as consistent a basis as Deshaun, and it's just such an amazing play extender especially for a team like the Texans that is going into many games, especially this season, sort of outgunned from a talent standpoint.
I've never seen a quarterback carry a team, or at least carry a Texans team like this. I know Seahawks fans can relate because there were a few years where it was Russell Wilson versus the world. I know Colts fans can relate when it was Peyton Manning versus the world in the pre-Luck years where the roster just kind of wasn't there other than a few key pieces, but the depth was awful. And then we saw when Peyton was out how bad that team really was. Deshaun's on the same plane right now of it's him and like Laramie Tunsil and a couple other guys versus the world. And they're not going to win a lot of games, but you can see how damn good Deshaun Watson is. And I promise you get him a good coaching staff, you get him some weapons, you build him a roster like Kevin Stefanski walked into in Cleveland, and that dude wins a Super Bowl. Straight up. He's that good. It sucks as a Texans fan because I know we're so far away from that. I just have to have faith eventually we're going to get there. I don't know when, but part of being a fan is just hoping that eventually we get to that point.
The backdoor cover for you, Brett, is that he shoots his way out of town and the Bears pick him up.
Oh, shut up. Ugh. Don't even.
Oh, it'd be so wonderful. I mean, Robert Mays.
For you.
Yeah, well, sure. But, by extension, you being a closet Bears fan, you could have some enjoyment. It wouldn't be a complete and total loss. I'm trying to think of you here.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Why don't we move on to Chiefs and Dolphins so I can put this miserable fucking game out of my mind. Chiefs and Dolphins, immensely more entertaining, by the way. I actually watched that game live instead of Texans Bears because I couldn't bring myself to watch that one live. I just watched it on replay so I could do it in less than 3 hours. Plus, I was working on a video at the time on the Chiefs offense, so I felt like I should have watched that game live. But I don't really regret my decision, to be honest. It was a great game. A little bit tighter in the end than maybe it should have been, but there were still a lot of big plays on both sides. I do want to kind of lead off with some stats that I was compiling going into this game because I was kind of doing some research on how this Dolphins defense, which was ranked second in the league in points per game going into it, I was like, okay, how are they going to stop the Kansas City offense, which was somewhere in the top 3 in points per game? It's a huge matchup. So I was trying to see, okay, what does Miami do well? What does KC do well? How do they match up against each other? And going into the game, this is very interesting. All NFL quarterbacks that have faced the Dolphins going against their man coverage, and this is including Josh Allen, who lit them up in week 2. 89 of 163 for only 1,172 yards at 7.2 YPA, below average-ish. 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 15 sacks against man coverage this year. If you take out Josh Allen, who had a ton of yards, 299, 12 and a half yards per attempt, 4 TDs, no picks, no sacks. If you take out Josh Allen, who's a demigod, all non-Allen quarterbacks, 873 yards only, 6.3 YPA, 5 TD, 5 interceptions, 15 sacks for the season. When Miami plays man coverage, particularly single high man, they were tearing people apart. However, Patrick Mahomes going into this game versus man coverage, meaning cover 1, 2-man, 0, anything that's man coverage. 64.6% completions, almost 1,200 yards, 1158, 9.1 yards per attempt, super efficient. 8 touchdowns, no picks, only 4 sacks. And he had almost as many attempts versus man as all quarterbacks combined versus Miami's man coverage. So he's really, really damn good against man. It's kind of his strength, and especially against zero.
That reminds me of the old blitz him at your peril line.
Blitz him. I mean, Baltimore tried it, failed miserably. Every team that's tried to blitz him or play one high coverages, meaning cover 1, has failed miserably. So I went into this game saying, look, Miami, I know your temptation is to do what your strength is. I get it. It's got you to this point. Do not do that. Do not play zero. Do not play one high. If you're going to do it, you have to do it a certain way, which is realizing that on like long yardage situations, Mahomes is going to retreat to 11 or 12 yards deep. He's going to set himself up and just back and get away from pressure and throw it deep. That's kind of what he likes to do. So just stop the deep ball first in zero. If somebody's running free underneath, uncovered, so be it. But just double Tyreek in zero, let somebody run free, and Mahomes is inevitably going to try to throw it to Tyreek, and you're going to get an incompletion. That ended up happening later in the game. But if you're going to risk man coverage, there's certain ways you have to do it. But most importantly, don't risk man coverage. Play too deep, play quarters, play cover 2, keep everything in front of you, and then get the Chiefs into the red zone, because once they're in the red zone, they're 23rd in the league in converting red zone opportunities to touchdowns. They are not a good red zone offense. Going into this game, they had 7 straight red zone appearances without a touchdown. They're really bad at it. So if you can just keep everything in front of you, limit big plays, don't play man coverage, get them into the red zone, inevitably they'll stall out. That is the way to play. I was worried that Miami was not going to do that, and unfortunately, they got bit by that a couple times by caving into their own tendencies. But what's interesting is that even when they did play too high sometimes, because they had an injury at safety to McCain multiple times in this game, they had a backup safety in that screwed up playing in too high, and they still gave up big plays. And that's the number one thing you can't do against KC is don't give up big plays. They had a decent game plan. They tried to get away from their tendencies, and it still bit them in the ass because of injuries. So I just want to say, overall, Chiefs, you do have some problems on offense. Miami, you do have some problems on defense, but you had a decent plan. If McCain didn't get injured, this game might have been a lot closer.
Yeah, I think your points about don't give up the big plays, make them work for it, pack them into the red zone are really important for this year's version of KC's offense because they work in space. They work really, really well in space when they can run wide receivers from one side of the formation to the other, and they can retreat and they can do double reverses. We've seen that a bunch from them this year. When Mahomes can drop back 12 and 13 yards, roll out to the side, and everybody's 4 and 5 seconds scrambled down the field playing in deep space, forget it. They're gonna destroy you. They're literally gonna carpet bomb you off the planet. But when you pack them down, remove some of that space, let the boundaries be your extra defenders, they have more trouble this year. And that's going to be the way that folks are going to have to try and grind them into the mud, because right now trying to limit KC is incredibly frustrating.
Yep.
Because you can have a great plan and you can do a great job against their top 5 weapons all day, and then number 6 and 7 will beat you for a touchdown. This week it was Mecole Hardman, right? He blasts one in on a punt return of all things. And that's just, it's so frustrating as a defense to have played, again, a solid plan, very solid in your execution, in your individual assignments, keeping things in front of you. That level of discipline to maintain during a football game against a player like Pat Mahomes is very difficult to do. And one slip, and literally the fifth or sixth options on offense, or in this case, special teams, end up sinking you for a touchdown. And if your offense isn't up to throwing up some points, you're going to have a very long day. So you have to play near perfectly with a good plan, right? You have to play the percentages, and then you got to hope that those, fifth and sixth players don't come to play that day. But so far this year, it has carried them through.
And, people say, oh, just double Tyreek, double Kelsey. KC does an excellent job of making it so that you can't do that. One of their favorite things to do is they'll get into 3-by-1 sets and they'll have Kelsey as the isolated receiver in 3-by-1, which if you're playing too deep against that, which again, I established you kind of have to. Like, you have to play too deep because they'll put Tyreek in the slot. They'll try to get him matched up on like a linebacker or a slot corner and get an easy kind of, especially if you're running like one high against that, it's crossing routes all day. He's going to burn you. So you kind of have to play too high so you can double Tyreek. But if you're doing that from too high, and Kelsey's the isolated receiver in 3-by-1, and you put a note in here about this catch in the fourth quarter where he just kind of posted up on Eric Rowe outside. Like, again, you have to give Kelsey the 1-by-1 in that the one-on-one in that alignment. You just have to, because of how the offense is arranged. Somebody's going to have to be the one-on-one in a 3-by-1, and the number one receiver that's isolated is almost always going to be that guy. So they force you to give Kelsey that matchup, which he's going to win 9 times out of 10 because he's Travis freaking Kelsey. He's one of the greatest tight ends to ever live.
Yeah, there was a stat that came up this week that blew me away, and I sent it to you, and it blew you away too. Travis Kelsey is leading the league, any position, regardless of position, in receiving. Travis Kelsey is the leading receiver in the NFL. That's nuts. Yes, he has an all-time quarterback, and yes, he is very good in his own right. We're going to talk about a tight end later on that plays for another team that is looking a whole lot better than he actually is because of his quarterback. That's not the case with Travis Kelsey. This is a dual relationship between quarterback, an amazing quarterback, and an amazing receiver who happens to play tight end. But Travis Kelsey is literally 3 games away from leading the league in receiving as a tight end. That's insane. That's nuts.
And I think he's going to do it. Because,
totally possible because of exactly what you just described, right? Because of the positions the Chiefs put him in, and quite frankly, put the defense in to say, okay, balances out. What do you want to do? You want to leave Tyreek singled up? You probably don't based on results. So go ahead, leave Kelsey singled up. You pretty much have to. And they're just smiling either way, right?
Yeah, they'll put Watkins and Mecole and Tyreek all on the same side and say, here's guys that run 4-4 or better. We know you have to put all of your passing strength on that side. We know you do. So here's Kelsey one-on-one all day, every day. And the thing is, his connection, his mind meld with Pat, even on plays where he's not even designed to get the ball, there was a third down. They ended up not converting it. It was 3rd and 12, something like that. But it was a great example. I can't remember exactly when in the game it was, but I charted it, where Kelsey was actually blocking. And he felt the edge rusher disengage, and he was on the left side of the formation. He was pass blocking. He felt the edge rusher disengage and run to his left. And so he immediately knew Pat's rolling left from pressure. And so he immediately got off the block and then slipped downfield and looked for the ball because he knew Pat's going to run towards the boundary. And he didn't run towards the boundary. He kind of drifted towards the middle of the field. And he knew Pat's running from pressure to his left. I'm going to go to Pat's right. He's going to get me the ball. And that's just a rare thing, to have a tight end that can feel an edge rusher getting off of a block and knowing where his quarterback is and knowing where his quarterback wants to get rid of the ball in a pressure situation. That's rare. That's so rare. He's so instinctual, so talented, obviously. And just he and Pat, it's a connection unlike anything else in football right now. I can't believe how damn good they are.
Except for maybe, and this is wildly unfair, the connection literally on the other side of the offense between him and Tyreek, because that's also Vulcan mind meld level where you'll see them break routes deep downfield after the play is broken down, and it looks like they drew it up that way, and nobody draws up a play to take 5.5 seconds. Like, nobody does that, but they make that connection look seamless time after time after time. And it's a testament to all three of those players. The fact that they're all in the same offense right now and playing at that level at the same time, regardless of guys that we regularly gush about, like CEH, like Hardman. There's a lot of other talent on that offense. I mean, they've got Le'Veon Bell, for God's sake. That's your either your starter or your backup, depending on how you want to talk about it. But that's a scary level of talent on a similar team.
Yeah, and that's why their margin for error is so high. Because again, and Chiefs fans listening to this can back this up. I don't want you guys getting pissed about this because you know it's true. I've never seen the Chiefs play a mistake-free game in this entire year. They don't do it. They're incapable of playing a mistake-free game. They're going to screw up at some point. They're going to stall at some point. They're going to have a drop. They're going to have penalties. They're going to take sacks. But their margin for error, because of those explosive plays with Kelsey and Hill, makes it so that those mistakes don't really matter. And we saw that early in the game. You got back-to-back interceptions. They're trying a double screen that Van Ginkel kind of falls down. Van Ginkel, favorite of the pod, because he just randomly makes plays every single week. This week was no exception. Randomly falls down, gets back up, tips the screen. They pick it off. Come back again on the next drive. They get backed up into a third and long situation because of a botched snap. So Mahomes takes a sack because of the botched snap on first down. They're in 3rd and 12. What do they like to do in 3rd and 12? Have Pat back way the hell up, 12 yards deep, and then throw it deep to Tyreek. Miami saw that coming. They showed zero, backed out of it. Pat's backing up. And you saw the Miami edge rushers set their aiming point for 12 yards deep, so he had nowhere to go. He couldn't step up. He left his offensive line out to dry. Tried to sprint like 30 yards backwards to get away from pressure. Took a sack. They had to punt on 4th and 42. Again, making mistakes. Very next drive, Pat's trying to throw it to Clyde on a check down. Leaves it high. Bounces off Clyde's hands. Picks. It was the messiest start to a game they've had probably since their playoff win over Houston, where they were down 24-0. But they scored 30 unanswered after that. Their margin for error after starting games slow is unlike anything I've ever seen, because you get the rushing touchdown to Tyreek against a backup safety who totally misjudges his angle and gets burned. You get the deep post touchdown to Tyreek, also against a backup safety that was fresh in the game because McCain got injured for the second time. He steps up like 4 steps off a play fake and doesn't respect Tyreek's speed because he doesn't know better yet. Tyreek runs right on by him for like a 48-yard touchdown. You get the punt return to Mecole right after that. You get the safety after Hardman fumbles. Again, they're never going to play a mistake-free game. Hardman fumbles. Miami gets the ball inside the 10, then they immediately take a safety. You get 30-0 run after that kind of sloppy start, and nobody's surprised. That is Chiefs football.
Yeah, they play so loose because of their ability to strike from anywhere that those kind of mistakes often sort of sink a team. They sink you can talk about momentum being real or not, but they sink the sort of mental fortitude of a team like, oh man, we had him, we were close, that was our touchdown, right? Chiefs don't care. They're going to score a touchdown on the next one. Yeah. If they don't do that, they're going to score a touchdown on the one after that. So we spent a lot of time talking about the Chiefs, but the Dolphins played a decent game here. This was closer. Both because of some Chiefs mistakes, but also because the Dolphins are a pretty good team. And like you said, they came into it with a good plan. Xavier Howard, we have to talk about Xavier Howard. We talked about him last week. We need to talk about him again this week. A one-handed pick following the KC drive. We talked about those one-handed interceptions being a theme this week. He has a pick in 5 consecutive games. He's got to be in the Defensive Player of the Year running. You just have to talk about Xavier Howard. He's not getting a ton of press. Nobody's saying his name. And that matters in things like the Defensive Player of the Year voting. And he has shown up. He is as close to a lockdown corner, and I really don't believe there is any such thing in the league anymore with the rules the way they are. But Xavier Howard has been playing as well as any corner in football for a while now, and he is producing takeaways at a very regular rate that you don't see from even some of the top corners. 5 weeks in a row with a pick. What is that, 9 overall now? Does he have 9 picks on the year, I
Yeah,
think?
it's insane.
He's playing exceptionally well. He's doing it every week. And if you ask people, who are the top 5 corners in football or the top 10 corners in football, Xavier Howard either doesn't get mentioned or gets mentioned really late. And that's got to change. Like, he's playing really, really high level football right now.
I remember it was like a week and a half ago, I put out a tweet because I was just kind of randomly looking at Asante Samuel's stats. Asante Samuel, one of the greatest ball hawks at the cornerback position we've ever seen. And you saw in his kind of overall game logs, in an 11-year career, Asante Samuel averaged an interception once every 3 games, which is insane. Like, that is remarkably consistent production. And so I tweeted out, I was like, man, like, for a corner, getting a pick once every 3 games over an 11-year period is incredible. Like, I don't really know many guys that can kind of match that other than like Rod Woodson. And somebody mentioned in the replies, I was like, well, Ed Reed had a pick once every 2.6 games, which makes sense. Ed Reed's one of the greatest ball hawks in the history of the sport. I was like, damn, that's pretty impressive. Over a 5-year career, Xavier Howard has an even better interception rate than Ed Reed. Once every 2.5 games, that dude is getting an interception. That is mind-blowing, especially in a 5-year sample size with a guy that started every game of his career except for one. He only I think it was in his rookie year that he didn't start one game in 2016, but then he immediately got the starting position. I mean, when he gets picks, it's picks in bunches. He often gets multiple interception games. And the one, as you mentioned, against Tyreek, all-pro versus all-pro, slot fade from one of the greatest quarterbacks, young quarterbacks we've ever seen, to one of the most dangerous receivers in the league, goes up, skies up, one-hands that thing, channeling his inner Brent Grimes. I mean, this dude's a special player. And I mean, historically special in terms of his ability to generate turnovers.
Yeah, nobody's talking about him, which is the piece that I'm just slaughtered by, because it's not like folks aren't talking about the Dolphins. Like, the Dolphins are not a bottom-dwelling team. They may have had that designation at the beginning of last year, and look, they haven't had a ton of success recently, but this year, with the addition of Tua, they've got a coach who is in the running for Coach of the Year. Their front office staff is assembling a really talented roster. Their plan is working, and they've got a corner who is playing out of his mind, and nobody's talking about him. Again, like you said, out of his mind at a historic level with guys that are in the Hall of Fame, right? Ed Reed's a Hall of Famer, and you're bettering his interception rate. One of the most instinctive players in the NFL ever, period. Like, listen to Bill Belichick gush about Ed Reed on the NFL Top 100. You'll realize like how special Ed Reed is. And Xavier Howard's got a better interception rate than that guy. Like, and nobody's talking about him. So know Xavier Howard's name. Football fans that understand and appreciate what's actually going on with him. Very, very special stuff. Another guy I wanted to call out is Mike Gesicki. 2 touchdowns on the day for the Miami tight end. We talked about him early in the season as one of the top young tight ends in the league. Had a bit of a lull. He's really come on again in the past 4 games. That guy makes some incredible catches. I love him. I'm just going to profess my love for Gesicki right now. Such a talent. So fun to watch. People come out of the woodwork. Twitter's great for this. And like, well, he's not that fast. I'm like, I don't care. Did you see what he did on the football field on Sunday? Like, when it counted, right? He had a one-handed catch himself a couple weeks ago across the middle that was ridiculous. Just stabbed it out of the air. 2 touchdowns in this game against one of the best teams in football. Like, Mike Gesicki is a great, great tight end. And I think he's going to play. He just seems like one of those guys that he's not a one-trick pony. He's able to do multiple things. Seems like he's going to be able to sustain the success. He's got Tua, who doesn't mind throwing to the middle of the field in the quick game. Like, it feels like Mike Gesicki is poised to have a very, very productive run here of, a good 2 or 3 years where he just puts himself on the map and establishes himself. So keep eyes on Mike Gesicki. Miami played a good game against Kansas City. They're not there yet, but almost nobody else is either.
Yeah, and I truly think if McCain didn't get hurt multiple times, because he kind of came out once, then came out again for something different. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was a foot injury or something like that. Both of Tyreek's touchdowns were right after he left the field because he's one of the best free safeties in the league. And without those touchdowns, and then the special teams mishap with Hardman, if they just if they were just able to stay over the top and force the Chiefs to mount 10 play plus drives and go in the red zone and earn every single yard, if they just copied Denver's game plan and added a little bit more offense, they would have won that game. Will they get a rematch in the playoffs? Pretty decent chance they will. And if Gesicki comes back from injury in time for that game, because he hurt his shoulder and left the game in this one, if he comes back in time for that game, if McCain's healthy, if they have Kyle Van Noy back and Landon Roberts back, and they're playing at full strength, I think Miami can actually pull it off.
We didn't even mention that Van Noy was absent, and yes, to the casual fan, that might not seem like the biggest loss because, look, Miami brought in, I think very purposefully, but a bunch of defensive free agents. We talked about it in our AFC East, sort of draft offseason recap about all the talent they brought in and the sort of various states of those guys. But Van Noy is literally the guy that calls their defense. So they go into playing Casey, or Casey comes in to play them specifically, and they are minus their defensive play caller, their leader, and they still push the Chiefs to a close finish. I'm with you. If they have their horses, that rematch is going to be lit.
Yeah, there's very few teams in the AFC that I think can actually give KC a game. Miami's one of them. Indy's one of them. And then, Denver's not going to make the playoffs, but I would also say Buffalo is one of them too. The Steelers, I don't really think the Steelers match up that well against Kansas City, believe it or not, even though their defense on paper is very, very good. They don't really have the DBs, I think, to handle them. And I do think Pat, in terms of how he navigates the pocket, I think can stay alive long enough to punish them. I mean, we just saw Buffalo light him up. And I think they do the exact same thing on offense. And Casey's defense is also underrated, and Pittsburgh's offense isn't that great. I think Pittsburgh is not a great matchup against KC. But the other three teams, again, that I mentioned that play too high, and Flores, I think, can learn from this and play a little bit more too high as well in the rematch, they could definitely give KC a game. So I think it's not a foregone conclusion that the Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl because there's a lot of AFC teams that match up decently well with them, and all of those teams are going to be in the playoffs. I think January is going to be a very, very surprising month in the AFC. So just, keep it tuned to those playoff games because I think they're going to be really, really entertaining. Before we move on to our last featured game of the week, I do want to thank our sponsor today, Manscaped, the best, most complete collection of products out of any men's grooming provider out there. Their world-famous line of lawnmower body trimmers have been the best trimmers on the market for a long time now, bar none. And their newest iteration, the Lawnmower 3.0, has only made them even better. It's fully waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. It has replaceable ceramic blades with their proprietary skin-safe technology to stop painful nicks and cuts. For the record, I've had these things for 2 years, and I have never cut myself, and I've used it literally dozens of times. It's got a really powerful 9,000 RPM motor as well to cut through even the thickest of hair. I use it weekly, and I'm also a big fan of their nose hair trimmer as well, the Weed Whacker. If you're not in need of any new trimmers right now, though, but you still want to up your grooming game or give the gift of a good smell to someone else this holiday season, Manscaped also offers a wide variety of excellent colognes, body washes, and deodorants that all smell fantastic and leave your skin and hair feeling amazing. I don't really know what their scent is called or even if it has a name, but they kind of have this signature scent that's shared across all their products that's just phenomenal. Highly recommend it. It's the best smelling thing in my shower. So if you're interested in either the Lawnmower 3.0 or the Weed Whacker or any of Manscaped's other great grooming products, head on over to manscaped.com and use promo code BOOTLEG for 20% off your order plus free shipping. Again, that is promo code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com for 20% off your order and free shipping. And with that being said, EJ, let's get to maybe the best game of the entire week. And that's saying a lot because we had a lot of barn burners this week. Ravens, Browns, just complete insanity, probably the game of the year. Why don't I just kind of give you the floor and you can wax poetic about this thing?
Yeah, I'm going to go up from game of the week and go to automatic game of the year candidate as soon as this thing ended, and even probably right before we knew that it was going to be that way. Tons of lead changes, starting to be that. Look, this is a divisional game. It's a huge game between the Ravens and the Browns. Both teams doing well this year. It's kind of that 2-for-1. You beat a divisional opponent. It's not just worth one win. It's almost worth a win and a half or two wins. The weather was there, right? They're playing in Cleveland, right off the lake. It's really cold. Field conditions are well manicured, but really slippery. We see a bunch of the Ravens falling all through the first half. Cleat selection, not quite what it probably should have been. And it just ramps up from there, right? We end up having sort of skirmishes in the beginning. Nobody's even talking about some of the things that happened in this game. We had a guy run into the goalpost on the Hail Mary at the end of the first half. When was the last time you saw a guy run full speed into a goalpost? It reminds me of the football on the street, except watch that tree down on the left after the parked car. Oh, you didn't. Okay. Yeah, you didn't know the tree was there. Okay. So, rushing touchdown record. They tied it. 9 rushing touchdowns in this game. Nobody's even talking about that because of all the other things that went on in this game and the way that it ended. Just a classic matchup. Stefanski's Browns. We have to remember that the first time they met the Ravens wiped them off the field, right? The Browns were not up to speed yet. Stefanski hadn't figured out exactly what he had yet, quite frankly. But all the pieces, all the pistons weren't firing together. So this is a completely different effort. And to all the people that say, oh, same old Browns, they lost the game, I say baloney. They took one of the best teams in the NFL. They scored 42 points, pushed them to the very end, answered every shot they had, and if anything, simply ran out of time or didn't have the better kicker. And that, to me, says they're as ready as they're going to be. And Stefanski has the Browns in a position of prominence and, again, maximizing all that talent that's on the roster. And we got to see a lot of it last night. We got to see the defensive talent. We got to see Baker playing in a game plan that really suited his strengths. We talked about that with Trubisky earlier. Stefanski did it with Baker in this game as well. We got to see that offensive line pounding open holes. All three of the Browns running backs had significant contributions. Great contributions from the Ravens running backs as well. If you're a running back freak like I am, this was straight up football porn. This was amazing football to watch. 9 rushing touchdowns was just overload.
First time since 1922.
Yeah, I know. And that's
100 years.
They've played a lot of football since then. And the fact that that's the case, that it goes back that far, is a thing. A starting quarterback leaving for mysterious reasons and being replaced by a guy who, quite frankly, just isn't as good. Sorry, Trace McSorley, and definitely am not, at all excited that he got injured and placed on IR. But, drama. You want to talk about it. Game's on the line, and the starting quarterback has to disappear and go to the locker room, and he's replaced by Trace McSorley, who tries his best, but certainly isn't Lamar Jackson. That was pretty obvious, to the surprise of no one. And then, bum, 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 hero turn, Lamar Jackson returns just in time to save the day. This game had everything, and I mean everything. It was incredibly entertaining as a football fan, as a football analyst, as a guy that appreciates matchups and game planning. All of that stuff was involved. Individual performances, great effort. It was just all there. It was a fantastic football game.
Right after this game finished, or it might have been right before it finished, I tweeted out like this game is so crazy that I have to change my film room topic for the week and do something on this game. I didn't even know what yet, but I was like, I gotta talk about it in some way. So I put off the KC offense video because that one's kind of evergreen. I could do that anytime. And I wanted to talk about this game. And when I was watching it today, I was trying to, pick up on something that I could use as like a teaching moment for the channel. And so I zeroed in on the Ravens run game because this was their second straight game, their 4th of the year with 200 plus rushing yards. So I wanted to talk about how they made that happen because they put up 45 points predominantly because of that run game. And beyond the narrative of this game, all the great storylines, all the crazy plays, all that kind of stuff, this was a great coaching clinic by Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator of Baltimore. He gets a lot of flack, including from me, for how he designs pass games. I don't really like how he does it. It's a lot of mesh. It's a lot of smash. It's a lot of basic stuff that not really a whole lot of creativity in the pass game, but unbelievable amounts of creativity in the run game. And the main staple that he's kind of leaned on this year in what I call gotta have it plays, like you need yards, you need to convert, you need a touchdown, you gotta have it, is a play called QB counter bash. In his playbook, Ted Nguyen, our buddy from The Athletic, did a great piece about it. It's called either 16 or 17 flow, but most people refer to it as QB counter bash. And what bash means is back away, as in like away from the running back. You are pulling two blockers, usually the backside tackle and guard, away from the direction of the handoff to the running back. So it's like you're running, power extra, but in reverse. The running back is going the opposite way of the pulling linebackers, or of the pulling blockers, and the pulling blockers are actually pulling for the quarterback. That is the QB counter part of the call. And it looks like an option play, but it's actually not. And the read is kind of predetermined. Roman is just very good at knowing which variation of it to call and when to kind of punish edge rushers. And they leave the defensive ends unblocked, by the way. And since it's not an option play, if the defensive end guessed correctly, it's pretty much guaranteed going to get blown up. So either they go inside and they follow the pulling blockers and they take Lamar, or they go outside and they try to take the sweep from the running back. They kind of have to choose one or the other. And then if they guess right, again, as I said, it's pretty much a guaranteed tackle for loss. If they guess wrong, it leaves a wide open lane. And so they called variations of this play 5 different times. The first was Lamar's rushing TD from the 5-yard line. You can go on Twitter, look at the highlights. You can kind of see the video, so you can get an understanding of the play structure that I'm talking about. His rushing touchdown from the 5-yard line. The second was in the second quarter on a 3rd and 3. Again, like I said, they call it in gotta have it situations, like on third downs. Lamar broke that one for a huge gain because the end, which I think was Myles Garrett, he shot way upfield to take the running back on the sweep. The linebackers followed the pullers, so there was nobody there in the backside lane. There was a huge alley, and instead of just following the pull, Lamar just took it right upfield, got a massive run out of it. They called it again, ironically enough, on the play that McSorley tore his ACL. That was also a bash call in a gotta-have-it situation on 3rd and 2, less than 3 minutes left. Except this time, Myles Garrett did not shoot upfield to take the running back because he recognized the formation. He stayed home and crashed in on McSorley. And again, like I said, it's not an option play. He doesn't have the option to just give it if Myles Garrett takes him. So he tried to make a move to make something out of nothing. When Garrett guessed correctly, he had him dead to rights, and he sprained his knee on that slippery turf while trying to make Garrett miss, which he wasn't going to do anyway. Lamar might have. He definitely would not have. And then the final time they ran it was 2 plays after McSorley tore his knee on bash. It was the 2-point try with Dobbins after Lamar threw the touchdown to Hollywood. And this time, again, it was 2 plays later, Roman knew that Garrett was going to play the quarterback on bash. So he just called the sweep off of it to Dobbins, who was going to be totally uncontested. He outflanked the defense because Garrett was not responsible for him. Met Sendejo at the goal line, ran him over. Sendejo actually got concussed on the play. Again, don't tackle with your head, kids. That's why you don't do that, because Dobbins is 220 pounds and will make you pay for it. Just a brilliant adjustment by Greg Roman to realize the defensive ends were changing how they played the bash call mid-game, and then he had a brilliant play call to counter that. Just an amazing call by him. Again, he's not very imaginative when it comes to the passing portion, but he understands play call sequencing in the run game better than anyone else in the league, and I don't think it's particularly close. Again, because of that run element, because of all the success they've had on QB counter bash this year, which is kind of their signature play, this offense can still score on anyone. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I can't disagree in terms of Roman being a savant in the run game in many ways, and it's not necessarily because of what he calls, it's when he calls it and how he calls it. And like you said, the sequence in which he calls it, which is so, so important as you see those adjustments. We talk about the best coaches are the ones who make second half adjustments, who see how things are changing and are a step ahead of that, or, ideally 2 or 3 steps ahead of that. And Roman in the run game is that way. I'm with you. His pass game is somewhat limited. And when guys like Mark Andrews don't have a great game, Greg Roman's game plans look pretty flat. But when, Andrews comes through and makes those sort of clutch catches when the run game is stalled, the whole thing starts to click. And obviously, with all the points they put up last night and all the rushing touchdowns, it was working. On the other side, this is as good as we have seen Baker in terms of his ability to answer, to hit back, to do the right thing, to make the right choice. And quite frankly, to execute. We saw some really good physical skills from Baker Mayfield last night. He threw a dart that I tweeted about to Njoku between 2 defenders that was an absolute rocket and couldn't have been more on target, slightly out front of the numbers, but it was a cradle catch by Njoku in between 2 defenders in the middle of the field. Just a rip.
That ball to DPJ was great too. The deep one.
He threw 2 to DPJ that were, you said gotta have it plays, and that rang in my ears. They needed those chunk plays. They had it, obviously, the rushing game was supporting them very well, but occasionally, when you're talking about a 40-point game, you've got to put up passing plays that count in the right spots. And Baker was able to do that. My favorite thing about it was he was able to counterpunch, right? He never went in the tank. He didn't make the big mistake at the end of the game or in the third quarter that gave the Ravens an extra, couple of possessions and really sunk the cause for the Browns. He had them right there at the end. It took a last second Justin Tucker field goal that was pretty long, mind you, to win this game. That is not something we've seen from Baker. He is starting to put it together. He is starting to trust and play within this offense that Stefanski has designed instead of outside of it. And that is a very, very good development for Cleveland and Browns fans, that Baker is your puncher's chance. He is the guy that can keep you in it to the end and put up a ton of plays, can utilize all the talent on that offense. And, remember, we've got, no OBJ in this game. They don't have all their weapons.
No Hooper.
This is not a full steam Browns team, and they still put up 42 and pushed the Ravens right to the end of the game. Lost on a last-second long field goal. I know there are no such thing as Pyrrhic victories, and Stefanski came out and said that today, and that's the right thing to say. Look, we're not in this for moral victories. We're in this for actual victories. That is the correct thing to say, and someone aptly noted on Twitter that is not what Stefanski's predecessors would have said, and that's why they're his predecessors.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good things if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. I know it hurts. They showed pictures of Cleveland fans. Look, long-suffering Cleveland fans, I think, is a fair adjective. Crying in the stands after this game, so disappointed, really thought they had it. Played an amazing game, and the answer is they did, and they've got more in the tank. Again, this was not the Browns at full strength, but they played up to their potential. This was in no way an easy game from the Ravens, and any one play could have turned it. That is the razor's edge that is the NFL.
Oh, you know what one play could have turned it, now that you mentioned that? When it's 4th and 5, and this was the Hollywood touchdown, don't play fucking 0. How many times do we have to say this? If you're in the lead and it's a 4th and 5 and they have to drive the field and get points, don't play 0. Like, don't give it all up in one bite. Make them drive the field. It's unbelievable. Like, that's how Hollywood scored, is they called mesh against a 0 blitz. They brought, I think it was their linebacker or safety, I can't remember who, came inside. Lamar rolled out to the right. He bought time. And mesh, if you don't know, it's a rub concept, which is great against man coverage. Terrence Mitchell got rubbed off of Hollywood, who leaked deep. There's no safety there because it's 0, because they called that for some reason. Lamar let it fly. Hollywood ran unopposed 44 yards for the score. The only reason I could think why they would even want to call that is because it was only a 1-point lead. The 2-minute warning just happened. Maybe they were afraid of Baltimore actually like converting with like a 6-yard gain or something like that and then just killing clock until Tucker kicked the field goal anyway. Like maybe they were worried about that. But if you are worried about that, again, just do you have to call zero? Like, do you have to call a man coverage when all game long on third in like third down situations, third and medium, you were showing man all day long? Like they already beat you on mesh earlier in the game on a 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, if I remember correctly, because that's what the Browns do. They play man coverage on third down. Like if there's ever a time to break tendency and show man and then like hit him with a trap zone, like they call it a cougar call, where like you're trapping. How do I explain this? Anyway, it's like it's a variation of cover 2. Like that would have been the time to call that. Like show man, and then have your corners get into phase like it's man, and then drop into zone. Like that's the time to call that. You don't call zero because then you're giving up a touchdown. Like it's Hollywood Brown. He runs 4-2. You can't catch the ball, but the one time he does, you're not going to catch him. I don't know.
I was going to say, in the Browns' defense, before this point, Hollywood Brown had dropped literally everything. He had 3 drops on the night. He couldn't catch a cold on a cold night on the lakefront. And of course, he catches the lob, over zero and streaks in for a 30-yard touchdown because in this particular game, why wouldn't he? This is how the scriptwriters write it up, right? You wouldn't have that drama if he had dropped that ball on the turf like he did the previous 3. So, I get the gamble, but I'm with you. I wouldn't have called it.
When you're showing man coverage in those situations all game long, you can pretty much bet they're going to dial up mesh because that's what they do. That is their answer to man coverage. That's literally what they've shown all season long. If there was ever a time to do a tendency breaker and call zone, that was it. I feel like Joe Woods misplayed that one. I get why he did it because they only had a 1-point lead. He was throwing everything on the table and saying, we want to end the game right here and now. I get why, but I heavily disagree with it. And as you said a few minutes ago, one play changes a game like that. And that was the one play.
Yeah, it was a razor-thin margin. One note, now that McSorley got hurt, Tyler Huntley, favorite of the pod, drafted this year, quarterback out of Utah. We really liked his skills. We likened him to a backup to somebody like Lamar. We thought, well, that would be a good place for him to end up. He ends up there. He's on the roster. He is now the backup quarterback of the Ravens. Look, we want to see Lamar play all he can because he's a superstar, and the Ravens, as we just said, are not the same without him. But if Tyler Huntley ends up getting a few snaps at the end of this year, I would not be sad because I think he has a very interesting skill set. He was my guy from the later quarterback roster ranks, guys that were going to either be drafted late or go undrafted. Quite frankly, the reason Tyler Huntley went undrafted is his throwing motion is, according to evaluators, atrocious. He looks really gross throwing the football, but if you put that out of your mind and look at what he does, where he places the football and what the results are, they're amazingly pretty, but people couldn't really get by that throwing motion. He's a very athletic backup, so it'll be really interesting to see if Tyler Huntley gets a few snaps, but that's just an interesting bootleg note if you listen to all those draft prep podcasts we did and then of course, the AFC North wrap-up. We definitely mentioned Tyler Huntley because he is a guy that we both believe in, and he's in a good system. Again, we don't want to have to see him play. We'd rather see Lamar Jackson be healthy. But Tyler Huntley, interesting guy, and is now the primary backup since McSorley was placed on IR today.
If I remember correctly, he had a higher passer rating under pressure than Joe Burrow last year in college.
Yes, he did.
Which is insane.
He had some very sneaky stats.
Yeah.
If you're an analytics guy, Tyler Huntley was definitely a guy that you were paying attention to. Again, in the later rounds, we're not saying he should have been drafted ahead of Joe Burrow or anything silly like that. We're saying as a guy that you can basically get, quote unquote, for free in terms of draft capital that is a very late round draft pick or as a UDFA, an undrafted free agent, Tyler Huntley is a guy that we had tabbed as, has promise, right? Has some really good results. but definitely has a bit of a funky throwing motion, and you'd be surprised the weight that carries with certain evaluators. The quote-unquote old argument of doesn't look like a quarterback. I think Huntley, again, with some good pro coaching, has certainly enough traits to deliver in a backup quarterback role. Again, I'm not penciling him as a starter anywhere, but one of those guys with talent that's worth investing in.
Yeah, he's got some young Tyrod to him, I say, athletically, but also like potential as a passer.
Totally agree.
Like he's that, and Tyrod, I started in Baltimore, same kind of thing, and he developed into a capable starter in a few different places, and he's gonna play. Like Tyrod's the kind of guy that's gonna play forever as like that veteran journeyman backup that can also come into a game and give you a few good starts, and I think Tyler Huntley can be exactly that, if not better, because of his physical skills, and I wish him the best. I think I don't think Baltimore lost anything here at the backup quarterback position. I think they'll be just fine with Huntley if Lamar goes out. So anyway, why don't we wrap up this game, because we've been talking about it forever, and hit 4th and long, because we got a whole bunch of other games to talk about. Why don't we start with Broncos Panthers, where favorite of the pod, KJ Hamler, who we talked about incessantly over and over and over again in the pre-draft process, kind of had his breakout day, flashing that 4.2 speed. He had a really pretty touchdown deep from Drew Lock, where the Panthers blew what's called a jump call. The free safety jumped a crossing route. Backside corner didn't get there in time to replace. Not that it's easy to replace on a guy that runs 4.2 anyway. Lock put it out in front. Great touchdown from KJ. He really showed off that explosiveness, and I think he's certainly cementing himself as a key cog in that offense for next year. Once they get Cortland Sutton back and Judy's there as the number 2, I think they're probably going to run 11 personnel on damn near every play, because I can't really justify keeping KJ Hamler off the field.
Yeah, Hamler is one of those guys that's starting to get his opportunities late. Didn't really shine. Had a few highlight plays in the early part of the season, but now here in the later part of the season, starting to show up more often. This was a 2-score day for him. That's obviously going to get some people's attention. But just imagine if like Marquise Brown was your third and slot receiver. That's KJ Hamler in Denver. He can grow into that kind of role. And I would say he's slightly more competitive with the ball in his hands.
Also, KJ's better than Marquise, just saying.
Yeah, I think he's more competitive with the ball in his hands after the catch than Hollywood is. So the other things of note in this game, Jeremy Chin with a bootleg shot of the week nominee, a huge sack fumble shot on Drew Lock, 6:27 in the second quarter if you want to look it up. Chin hit him as hard as any safeties hit a quarterback in a few weeks. Absolutely knocked Drew on his back, and he laid there for a while and just thought, I'm going to let that one wear off a little bit. Panthers ended up returning the fumble. Yeah, Chin is a big guy that moves very, very quickly. If you're a fan of the pod, you are familiar with his exploits. He nailed Drew right in the chest straight up, and that is not something Drew's going to forget anytime soon. Other notes, Joe Brady, who's had a very good early season. I think defensive coordinators are getting a little bit of tape on him, and the Panthers are struggling in the red zone. Teddy had a really efficient day. Really nice passing numbers, made the right choice. Again, isn't going to stretch the field vertically a ton, but had some really good mid-level shots that, again, were on time and on target, allowed the Panthers offense to move. But when the Panthers get in the red zone, they are not scoring with regularity. They're having to rely on the kicker more than you'd like. And that's something that Joe Brady's going to have to kind of break through. He's going to have to sort of see where that glass ceiling exists for his offense and figure out a way past it. And until they do, they're going to be an easier out than they would be if he gets a little bit more creative again when the field compresses. And look, he's not the only offensive coordinator to struggle with that.
No, he's not. But I'm kind of looking forward to 2021 with both of these teams at this point, because both of them are out of it. But they both have a lot of young talent that I really, really like. I want to see both of their coaching staffs return, because I think both of them, in Denver's case, I think they kind of got really screwed over with injuries this year. I mean, Drew Lock also, was injured with a shoulder injury for a good part of the early part of this season. Not that, I'm a big Lock guy at the moment, but I at least want to see what he can do next year, because he's still going to be on the team. I at least want to see what he can do next year with Cortland, with even more O-line depth, with a defense that isn't completely just decimated by injury. And the Panthers also, again, very, very young team. Lots of young talent, Jeremy Chin included, who you just mentioned. And I do want to talk a little bit about Chin as well specifically, because I want to compare him to somebody else who I think we both regard as an all-pro type safety in a very similar role. And Chin has almost identical stats. So they both have 74 solo tackles. Jeremy Chin has 25 stops, meaning stopping like a first down run within like 3 yards, basically. Or on a goal line, it's stopping it for no gain. That's what PFF considers stops, is stuff that prevents an offense from getting at least 40% of the total to a first down. So it kind of depends on the down and distance, but it's a key stat. So Jeremy Chin has 25 of those, and the guy I'm comparing him to has 29. So pretty similar. Jeremy Chin has 2 forced fumbles. Safety B has 1. He's got 1 interception. Safety B has 2. In terms of pass breakups, Chin has 5. Safety B also has 2. So stats are virtually identical. He's a little bit behind in some areas, a little bit ahead in some areas. You know who Safety B is?
No.
Budda Baker. They are
damn
near
the fellow
same.
Agent of Chaos.
And he's got more pressures. He's got 1 fewer sack, but he's got more quarterback hits and more hurries.
Yeah.
It's the same guy.
Yeah, very similar, except much larger, and I would say a tick faster as well, and that's not just because DK caught him. Chin is a physical marvel, always has been. That was a big part of his allure coming out of a lower conference, getting drafted last year was, look, he's fully 220 pounds, well over 6 foot tall, and brings it, is not afraid to be physical at that size. And the Panthers have done a nice job of moving around, giving them those opportunities, playing close to the line, playing him deep. That's the thing. If you're going to have, pass breakups and interceptions and sacks, they're going to have to move you around and play you in different alignments. And they've done that. And Chin has adapted certainly more quickly than I thought he might, and has brought sort of all those skills on display more often and more quickly than I thought he would when he got drafted. But all the sort of initial returns from his rookie season, look really solid. He has played above expectation, and I would say the arrow is pointing way up for Jeremy Chin.
Yeah, he's just tremendous young player. I want to move on to Titans Jags here, and the first note you put down is the big three of Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown can go toe-to-toe with just about any other triplets in the league. I 100% agree. And if you don't believe me, look at A.J. Brown's one-handed touchdown, which was just a freak of nature type play. Very few receivers can do that.
I think it's Brown that's really brought this comparison into the spotlight, right? Tannehill played at a very efficient and high level at the end of last year, and people started to come around to his game with Arthur Smith's offense in Tennessee and how he could complement the power running game with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, I think, was known, but again, has improved and has increased the number of things he can do even this year. And the Titans were really waiting for the emergence of a wide receiver. Brown flashed a little bit last year. Corey Davis, again, hadn't hit the heights that he hit this year, again, in the same offense. And Brown's ascension this year to be compared with some of the top wide receivers in the league is really the thing that's elevated this particular trio into that conversation that says, hey, give me any three off your team, and ours'ns are better than yours'ns and vice versa, right? We can stack our 3 up against your 3 and go anytime. And Tennessee with those 3 has a really strong hand in just about any game they go into. If they go into a game and those 3 guys are healthy and functioning at a high level, that sort of top end of talent, if you're talking about Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's, like, again, our talent versus your talent, our ability to make plays in key situations versus your ability to make plays in key situations. Those three, from a physical and production standpoint, are as good as any three in the league.
And especially AJ and Henry, like, they give you a kind of a bigger margin for error for Tannehill because he can just get it to him in space and they're going to break tackles. It's got to be a remarkably...
I was going to say, funny you use the word bigger.
Yes, yes.
Because they're both massive
huge.
at their position.
They're huge.
I mean, they're both really large guys.
But it's got to be a comforting feeling for Tannehill to know, like, he doesn't have to, stretch the field with AJ for him to rip off a big gain. Like, it can be a slide route off play action, and he can get 30 yards out of it. It's got to be nice to know, like, hey, I can throw a throwback screen to Derrick Henry, and he's going to get a 90-yard touchdown out of it. Like, I don't have to make every single throw. Like, I could just give them the ball quickly, and they're going to go do something with it. Corey Davis has been, weirdly enough, a better downfield threat for them than I think AJ. AJ's really at home in the short and intermediate, where you can just get him the ball and just let him go run. He's one of the best yak threats in the entire league. And so it's just a comfort zone for Tannehill to have just these big bruising monsters of human beings that give him a bigger margin for error about that. Now, in regards to Jacksonville, I think we know their defense is pretty bad. I don't think anybody's really questioning that. But Gardner Minshew has been kind of given the keys again. And I'm not really sure how to feel about it. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I do have a feeling about this. I have a strong feeling. And this has a lot to do with, we talked about staffs earlier, right? Coaching staffs and which ones are, we've talked about it all year. The ones that do okay with the talent they have, like perform at the level you'd expect, get the results you'd expect. The ones, particularly like Matt Nagy, that are not developing talent at that level or producing results that we think are equal to the talent that's on that team. And then those that are maximizing their talent, that are getting the most out of it. The Brian Dabolls, right, in Buffalo. A ton of talent on that team, but he is using it at the top level, and they are clicking on all cylinders. And as you said, they're a threat to knock off the Chiefs because of it. It's not just Josh Allen. It's the roster and the fact that they're being utilized the right way. Now, I don't think that of Doug Marrone, right, and his staff in general. I don't think that they are using their talent as well as they could. They're getting good results out of certain players. That's not the case. But as a team, I really don't understand how Jacksonville thought Minshew did not give this team the best chance to win, right? If you're bringing in Jake Luton, who I like as a developmental player, again, we talked about a Tyler Huntley, right? I think he's a good backup candidate. I think he throws a nice ball. I think he can come in and give you some solid downs in relief, but I don't think he's a starter, certainly not at this level. And, handing the keys to the ginger giraffe in the meantime was never going to be an answer. And now sort of limping back to Minshew and saying, okay, well, we were wrong. Go ahead and do what you do. And you showed it. He showed it when he came back into the game this week. Right. All of a sudden they had a spark. All of a sudden he made some of those plays that probably shouldn't have been made. Minshew's great at that, operating sort of in between A and B and coming up with something, creating something. Minshew is far better than the other two guys at that. And I don't really ever get why Jacksonville said, I think we have a much better chance if we go with one of these other two guys than this guy that is creative and overachieving, but does that fairly consistently, right? Does that put you at a top level in quarterbacking? No, but there's a lot of teams there, and you're not going to get there. Great quarterbacks don't morph out of the sky. They come after you have a terribly crappy season and can draft high, which, unless that was their intent to not make themselves as competitive, I don't understand why they put Minshew on the bench.
I don't really understand why they put him on the bench, but at the same time, I also know that he's not the future. And that's why I'm kind of torn.
Yeah,
on
he's
this.
absolutely not. But neither are the other guys on that roster, right? The other two are not some shining developmental prospects that might keep them from drafting a quarterback high. So again, unless their
Yeah.
intent was to keep that draft position intact and Minshew was a little too effective for their taste, which is not the way that coaches and players think. That's the way GMs think. I have never talked to a player who's like, I actually kind of want to lose a game. Like the players and the coaches, quite frankly, their livelihood depends on how well they do. So I've never met one of them. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna throw it in the bin for a potential draft pick. They don't care. They're in the league now. They're making money now. So I just don't think that makes sense as a coaching decision. And based on that, I don't see any rationale for putting Minshew on the bench, given what the Jags have, in the barn at quarterback.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Maybe if it wasn't Mike Glennon that he was benched for, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe they're just trying to. But we already know what Mike Glennon is. But I also think we know what Gardner Minshew is at this point, which is a backup.
Yeah, we do. But I would rather play Minshew than Glennon any day of the week because he's going to make a couple.
I don't
plays.
disagree.
He is a gamer and he's pretty savvy, and Glennon isn't.
I just think I almost feel like this sense of futility with the Jaguars at this point, where I just want to fast forward to the draft.
Yep.
And I'm sure their fans feel the same way. They're like, whatever, give us Justin Fields.
Yeah. But it's more entertaining football. If you're trying to put butts in seats or keep people interested, Minshew is far more entertaining than the other two guys as well.
I agree. I would rather watch at least him lose than Glennon lose. At least he's entertaining.
For sure.
I'll give you that. But why don't we move on to Cardinals-Giants, which was a result that personally I didn't expect because the Cardinals had an injured quarterback in Kyler Murray, who's clearly been struggling with a shoulder injury. Their defense has been a little bit shaky in spots as they've taken on some injuries. They had lost 3 straight. They went from 6-3 to 6-6. The Giants were on a roll. Their defense had been coming together. Oh, right. By the way, Daniel Jones was back and fumbled a bunch and got sacked 5 times. Okay. These are the Giants we know and love.
Yes, the Giants we know and love. And unfortunately for Giants fans, they got a little spark of hope. We talked about the Giants. We gave a mea culpa to Dave Gettleman and his plan for assembling talent. They had beaten the Seahawks, and rightfully so, the week before, and they come in again against a sort of limping Cardinals team, lacking a bit of identity, and you think, perfect chance for the Giants to rack up another win here. Doesn't really happen.
Not when your quarterback is Daniel Jones.
Hassan Reddick is really the reason this happened. Hassan Reddick plays out of his mind, comes up with 5 sacks, a couple of forced fumbles. As we talked about, Daniel Jones is the master of the quarterback turnover. The New York Giants gave up sacks in bunches. They just didn't give them up to Reddick. Was not their finest hour. But the Cardinals, contributed as well on their side. Kenyon Drake fumbling like crazy, gave up a couple of fumbles in this game. Cardinals got both of them back, but he committed those fumbles. And just wanted to give a shout out to Dan Arnold at tight end. Doesn't play a ton for the Cardinals, but is making the most of his opportunities and really has put together a nice bit of tape over the last 3 to 4 weeks, making a bunch of big impact plays. Had a great touchdown grab high at the back of the end zone in between 3 defenders in this particular game. Dan Arnold, not a guy that was sort of on my radar or I thought very much, quite frankly, mattered when we were doing, say, our preview before the season started. He has played very well in the role they give him and has had a bunch of impact. Yeah,
and it's funny because it was almost like a meme among Cardinals fans of the Church of Dan Arnold in the offseason. Everybody was convinced he was going to be great. And I was like, okay, well, it's a tight end in Cliff Kingsbury's system. When's the last time a tight end produced for Cliff Kingsbury? And little did we know, Dan Arnold became actually a very clutch option over the middle and in the red zone for them. Cardinals fans are right. He's a pretty good young player. I think he's got size. He's got ball skills. He's kind of got some Mike Gesicki to him, believe it or not.
Yeah, he plays more like a wide receiver, plays like a very large wide receiver, runs pretty well, is not a great blocker, has great catch radius, and has, like you said, has been clutch, has been come up big in big spots, even though he doesn't have a ton of their snap count share. The snaps he does get, he's making impact, and a guy like that is playing his way into more playing time, into more impact. So wanted to give a shout to Dan Arnold. But the Cardinals sort of end up destroying the Giants, which is, I don't think, what either one of us thought going into this game. But then again, we didn't see a guy like Hassan Reddick, who has played sort of at a middling level most of the season, having 5 sacks and a couple of forced fumbles. That will turn a game.
Yeah, he ate these tackles alive, and it's kind of interesting because Andrew Thomas, went 2 straight games without giving up a single pressure, and all of a sudden he gives up 7 pressures in this game and a couple sacks. Reddick was just killing him. Speed to power. He got on the right tackle. I can't remember who their starting right tackle in this game was, but just murdered him. And Daniel Jones, my thing with him, like, he only lost one of his 3 fumbles, but of course he fumbled because he's Daniel Jones. But the thing is, when you have your right tackle getting caved in with speed to power, you got to feel it. You got to feel it.
Yeah, you got to have a clock for sure. And I think that was the most noticeable thing. Look, I liked Colt McCoy coming out. I actually thought he was going to be more than he has been. He has been snake bitten by injuries, star-crossed, whatever you want to say. He doesn't seem to be able to start more than 3 or 4 games before he gets injured, but boy can move. He understands, right, when that pressure's coming backside, that he needs to step up or, move. And it's not like Colt didn't get sacked, but he didn't fumble when he did it, and he did it less. And boy, yeah. Daniel Jones comes back in, and you're like, yeah, right, he's back. He's going to stand there and get hit. And man, did he stand there and get hit versus the Cardinals. And it cost the Giants the game. Look, they didn't play a great game otherwise, but it was a difference and a notable one. Just a side note, a guy we really liked out of Oregon, Shane Lemieux, 6th straight start at guard for the Giants, and is progressing pretty nicely for a mid-round interior offensive lineman. I think the Giants have something there, so shout out to him.
By the way, I did want to nominate one of Reddick's 5 sacks. It was on a TE stunt where he kind of looped inside and just crushed Jones and forced one of the fumbles.
Yeah, take your pick, right? When a guy gets 5 sacks, probably one of them was bootleg shot worthy, especially when he's causing fumbles.
First of all, the move was great. So first of all,
yeah.
He's super quick, and he's definitely more at home as an edge rusher than an inside linebacker, which I highlighted this offseason. Like, hey, you should probably play him on the edge, and then they did towards the end of last year, and now he's full-time edge rusher, and he's got 10 sacks now. But it was a great move. They got him free on a stunt. And the thing with, like, this one wasn't even Daniel Jones' fault. Like, there was nowhere for him to go. But, again, similar to everything I'm talking about, even when you know you're going to get hit, protect the ball. Don't fumble when you see it coming. Like, Reddick just kind of chopped at him right when he took him down, forced it loose. It was just a phenomenal hit. Jones also got sandwiched from the backside at the same time. He got crushed in this game. So I'm nominating that sack to kind of represent all of Reddick's sacks in this game for shot of the week. I'll throw a clip up in the comments. You guys can vote any way you choose. But that being said, let's move on to our next game, which is Jets-Seahawks. I think we all expected the Seahawks to win. I don't know if I expected them to win by 37 points.
Yeah, it was a mashing. Rich Eisen went on his show this week. Rich Eisen, for those of you that don't know, a lifelong Jets fan, 51 years old, has been rooting for the Jets, in his words, as long as he can remember. Hardcore has never given that fandom up, even though he lives in Los Angeles with his family, and said this was the worst Jets performance he could remember, and cited why. He'd seen them lose by more, and he cited how many times, but he cited why this felt like rock bottom for the Jets. That being said, Marcus May, a player we highlighted early on in the year, between weeks like 1 and 3, played really, really well. And again, a one-handed pick in the end zone. Who knew that defensive backs were getting one-handed picks in the end zone this week? Well, we did, but no, Marcus May with an amazing one. And I just put the notes in. The Jets are a speed bump right now, and I don't mean to discredit the effort of all the athletes on that team. They are trying. Sam Darnold, actually, if you go back and chop up the Sam Darnold tape, he had a lot of nice throws in this game. I think there's something there with Sam Darnold. He came out this week and said, I want to be a Jet for life. And you said something like, seriously? For real? And I said,
purpose?
Stockholm Syndrome? right? Question
Poor
mark,
kid.
because that's all it feels like when your abusers have trained you to say, yes, yes, I want to bleed green and white for the rest of my life. I think Sam Darnold could have a very good second act somewhere else. If you go through and sort of pick this apart from a decisions and accuracy and a timing standpoint, he had some really good throws against the Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks don't have the best secondary. We all know that. But Darnold made a bunch of plays in this game, and I really think you put him in a place that has a bunch of weapons. Imagine Dak signs somewhere else and he ends up going to the Cowboys. And now he's throwing to Amari and CD, and he's got, Zeke and Tony Pollard to hand off to. Like, Sam Darnold could look really good with a star on his helmet. Like, I think he's got potential as a distributor in a very talented offense. But he's got to get out of New York. It's not good for him. And the Jets, especially at this point of the season, are kind of an afterthought. They are really just a warm-up for teams to go get some stats.
Yeah, I think the Colts and the Steelers are kind of what I'm looking at for him, because I want him to get out of the Jets too. That's Trevor Lawrence's problem now. But I think he could do some good things with Frank Reich to kind of revive his career. I think, considering the weapons and the offensive line they have in Pittsburgh, vastly superior to what they have in the Jets. And I think, say what you will about Randy Fichtner, or Fichtner, however you pronounce the Steelers offensive coordinator's name. Steelers fans don't like him very much, but he's better than Adam Gase. So I think, and Dowell Loggins. So I think Darnold can do some nice things in Pittsburgh, just considering the talent he'd have to work with. But he's done as a Jet. Like, this team is awful. Adam Gase should have been fired last year. And the fact that he's still even there just signals to me that they want to ensure that this team is as bad as humanly possible for the remaining, 3 weeks of the season, because it's just miserable.
I can't pick up that win right now. Picking up that win right now would be devastating.
Yeah, with Jacksonville right behind them
so long. And this was the whole point. If you go back and watch Rich Eisen's, I'll just say commentary. It was more of a rant, but have a ton of respect for Rich, and I really like him, but he's hurting as a Jets fan, and he was saying, look past this, right? Just push the pain down. This all soon will be over when we have a real quarterback, and that is coming, and it is coming soon. So don't pay attention to the short term. Just wait until it happens, and then, we will be rapidly lifted out of this quagmire we exist in. And I can't argue with him, right? If they get a real talent at quarterback and clean out Gase and Loggins, there could be a breath of fresh air in the Meadowlands pretty quickly.
I mean, Darnold is a real talented quarterback. They have a real talented quarterback.
I'm not arguing that.
They just don't have a real
just said
coach.
The opposite, right? Yeah, that I think he's very talented, but he is definitely on a team right now. We talked about this earlier on with a coaching staff that is not utilizing the talent on that team to create as many opportunities as they could, because he made some great throws against, a decently talented defense. They're not great, but they're a pro defense, and he made some very good throws, but it's not doing anything for the Jets right now. So time for that relationship to break up, time for him to go somewhere else and get a fresh start. We both hope it's in a good place, because we both think he's a talented player. Speaking of the Cowboys, Bengals, the Andy Dalton revenge game. Andy Dalton heading back to Cincinnati. Interesting stat that popped up in this one. The Bengals only have 15 sacks on the year, including 2 that came in this game. So coming into this game, the Bengals, going into week 14, had 13 sacks on the year. Less than 1 a week.
Ugh.
That was surprising to me. It also told me, as I'm putting together draft prep, Cincinnati could use an edge or two, right? Dunlap left in the trade to the Seahawks, and they really need to restock that cupboard. There is not a lot of edge talent, or, quite frankly, really interior defensive line talent. They had Geno for years. That's not the case. They need to put some pressure in that defensive line. It is sorely lacking. The Cowboys win this game. I think it's almost embarrassing to Dallas that this game was close, because Cincinnati, with no Joe Burrow, the offensive line, as we've talked about, which was not great, losing their best player. They're even worse now. The fact that this game was close for the first 3 quarters should be a huge wake-up call to Mike McCarthy and his staff, that a team as talented as the Cowboys were playing anywhere near the level of the Bengals with no Burrow and a banged-up offensive line. But Bengals came out. They were gamers. They certainly competed. But any Cowboys fans that are celebrating this as a quality victory should probably take a look in the mirror and say, we trounced a team that really should have been trounced, and we didn't trounce them as hard or as quickly as we probably should have.
Yeah, and there's been some reports that came out today that Mike Nolan is almost certainly going to be fired for what has been an absolute travesty of a defense with the Cowboys this year. I agree with that decision. Who they bring in, I have no idea. I know Wade Phillips wants a job, though. And if anybody could turn around this defense in one season, Wade Phillips has a history of doing that. And I think that could go a long way, assuming you get Dak back. Fingers crossed for them. If you get Dak back, if you get the offensive line talent back, because they got rocked by injuries as well. You bring in Wade Phillips to fix this defense, which he has a history of doing that. Like, the average ranking for his defense in his first years is in the top 10. Every single time he's taken over a new defense, they've immediately been great. I can speak from experience as a Texans fan. He did it for us too. We were awful in 2010. He comes in 2011, we're immediately top 2. So that's kind of his specialty. You bring in Wade, who has a history with the franchise. You get Dak back. Like, this could be the best team in the division, but Mike McCarthy's got to make some changes on his staff. They've got to get more offensive line depth. And McCarthy himself, I think, needs to learn from some of his failings as a coach this year on offense, too. And I think you could potentially have to look at the offensive staff, because I feel like they've made some intriguing, and when I say intriguing, I mean rough decisions on offense in terms of play calling, in terms of touch distribution. They're still not giving the ball enough to Tony Pollard. I'm sorry, at this point, he's a better running back than Zeke. Zeke is still out-touching Pollard, which is inexcusable to me.
Pollard played so well this week, too. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but you brought it up, so now I have to talk about it. Had a tremendous touch on special teams as well, but is showing just so much more pop than Zeke is right now. We talk about juice all the time, zip on offense, and Pollard is running with both speed and power. I can't agree with you more that Tony Pollard is one of those guys that is wildly underrated. And if I was looking for a feature back to start a team, a theoretical like 33rd team, and they said, again, they had like an expansion draft and Pollard was left unprotected, he's one of the first players I'd get on offense, because he is a force. Plus, he gives you something on special teams. Not that you're going to have your starting running back kicks, but he has that capability. Pollard, an exceptionally talented player.
Yeah, I think you have to gut the defensive coaching staff. I think you have to make significant changes to the offensive coaching staff, or at least just commit to looking at the numbers and understanding, like, hey, when you give Tony Pollard the ball, good things happen. You should do that more. There needs to be wholesale
Not
changes.
even analytics, just basic like effectiveness. Like,
yes,
hand ball to player A, result is B. B is
yes.
better than C. We should do B.
Even just the eye test. Like, the eye test tells you Tony Pollard's a better player right now. Give him the damn ball. I understand you paid Zeke. That's on you. That's your mistake. Like, that's not even McCarthy's
that's a lot
mistake.
like arguing that, you paid Carson Wentz, so you should just keep playing him. Nope.
Yeah.
There comes a time when that's not the best decision for your football team. Strangely enough, in the same division, but McCarthy's got some work to do. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Let's move on to another team in the NFC East who's doing much better, well, relatively speaking. And that's Washington taking on the 49ers. And, man, first thing I got to say, Chase Young is unbelievable. I mean, we all had high expectations
real
for him.
good.
real good. We all had high expectations for him coming out of Ohio State. Even though the numbers aren't like record-shattering, the talent that he displays every single week in a very, very good defensive line, this kid is unbelievable. He reminds me a lot of Myles Garrett as a rookie, where again, the numbers weren't quite there, and Khalil Mack was the same way. The numbers weren't quite there for Mack, and they weren't quite there for Garrett, but you saw the talent. I think year 2 for Chase Young is going to be exactly like Myles and exactly like Khalil, where everything comes together production-wise, because he's a crazy good defensive end.
Yeah, he's wrecking stuff. He has the benefit of playing on a very good defensive line, which not necessarily both of the other players you mentioned had that in their rookie years. They were clearly the best player. Like Chase Young, probably not clearly the best player on the Washington defensive line. They've invested a lot there, have a ton of talent, and yeah, he is still standing out every week. Wanted to talk about a couple of quick points for the 49ers in this game. Jeff Wilson, one of the many running backs for San Francisco, had a great rep in pass pro, and this is something as a running back aficionado that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, which is you got to hold up in pass pro. You cannot get your quarterback killed, and I don't care how talented you are with the ball. I don't care how many touchdowns you can score or runs you can break or tackles you can, force missed. If you don't stand up in the face of the oncoming linebacker and just blunt that guy, you're not going to be on the field very much because your quarterback's going to take shots. Coaching staff's going to see it on film, and they're going to say, yeah, you're getting 5 touches a game. That's it. Jeff Wilson, who is probably the least heralded of the San Francisco running backs, tremendous rep in pass pro, 14:35 to go in the second quarter. So just kicking off the second quarter. Just absolutely does that. Stands up in the face of a straight-up A-gap blitz, blows the guy up, runs him off to the edge, and gives his quarterback a ton of time to throw the ball. And then the TD throw to Juszczyk was a really fun design. So they had both the quarterback and the fullback head right at the snap on a run fake, gets everybody moving right. Juszczyk cuts back, and then the quarterback, who was Nick Mullins at the time, spins. So it's not quite orbit. He doesn't really go outside, but he basically spins back as if he was spinning out of a sack, and they turn it into a really quick sort of inside screen pass to the fullback for a touchdown. Really cool design. Whole line shifts right. There's actually a running back on the play. He too goes right. Everybody starts moving right. Juszczyk makes a little jab step, goes back to the left. Mullins spins out backwards to get himself some space, flips it to Juszczyk for a touchdown. Just a cool little play design. Not that many teams even have fullbacks, and certainly nobody's got a fullback like Juszczyk in terms of multi-role capability. Just one of those cool little details in a bigger and interesting game that was fun to watch and fun to call out.
Kyle's got one every week, man. Every single week.
At least one.
He'll bust out, and usually it involves Kyle Juszczyk. Now that I think about it,
he's such a it's an overused term, but Swiss Army knife, right? Can do a little bit of everything: pass receiver, blocker, lead blocker, run a wheel route and run it like a wide receiver. Like Juszczyk, when they paid him a ton of money as a fullback, everybody was like, dinosaur. They don't know what they're doing, and it's like, you haven't really looked at Juszczyk. He's one of the few guys in the league that can do all those things at a really high level. And Shanahan Shanahan and Lynch have every idea how they're going to use him and get that money out of him. And especially with Kittle out of the lineup, because I feel like he's sort of a kindred spirit with Kittle in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. They're using him as a sort of almost Kittle replacement or Kittle light. Now, nobody replaces George Kittle fully, but Juszczyk is making that loss a little bit easier to bear. And good on him for saying, hey, we're going to increase your load. We know you can do more, and we're going to use you in some creative and fun ways. And he looks like he's loving it.
Yeah, he's probably one of my favorite, and I use this term on purpose, offensive weapons in the league, because he is one. He is absolutely a weapon in every single, every single way, like in terms of blocking, catching, does stuff on special teams, sells out every single play, plays hard, executes his assignments. Like he's just the best. Like he's the best at his position in the league. Love that dude. And my last note for this game, Alex Smith did get hurt. Apparently reported a calf strain. So Dwayne Haskins did come in. Didn't do anything special, but he was efficient, moved the chains a few times when needed. Basically just didn't make any mistakes so this defense could win the game for him. I do think that might, assuming Smith comes back, that might have been some of the last passes Haskins throws for the Washington football team. And he, just like Darnold, is somebody that I think he has a lot of talent. And I want to see him play somewhere else that can maybe develop that talent, give him a fresh start, because I think he has a chance. I just don't think he has a chance in Washington.
Yeah, I would take Darnold in a heartbeat. I would definitely take Haskins as a developmental guy because I agree. I liked him coming out. It hasn't worked out. He did take a bad sack this week, but it'll be necessary, I think, for him to get a fresh start. But if you're telling me to pick straight up between him and Darnold, I'll take Darnold just because of his starting experience and what he's shown so far. He's farther along in his curve. Whatever he's going to be able to get out of what he has, he's closer to than Haskins is.
I don't necessarily disagree. I do think that Haskins, in terms of physical talent,
physical ceiling, he's definitely higher.
But he's got to go to the right. Like Haskins, I think would benefit from like the Sean Payton school of quarterbacks. Because Taysom Hill's a free agent after this year, Jameis Winston's a free agent after this year. Like if you're looking for a guy who's going to be dirt cheap or cost you almost nothing picks wise, and you still have 3 years of contract control, I could see it. I could definitely see it. I would love to see him work with Sean Payton in that offense, especially with his talent. Sean Payton's a great developer of quarterbacks. He made Taysom Hill passable as a starter in this league. I don't really like Taysom Hill.
Staggering achievement.
A staggering achievement. I don't like Taysom Hill like as a long-term starter, but they've won a lot of games. Well, not a lot, but they've only taken one loss with him at starter so far, which is saying something because he's not that good. But why don't we just skip ahead to the Saints-Eagles game? I have it further down on the schedule, but since we're on the subject of Taysom, why don't we actually talk about the Saints-Eagles game? Because this was their first loss under Taysom Hill, and I think we did see some of the, let's just call it limitations in accuracy, in playmaking ability as a passer. I mean, he missed some brutal ones to Emmanuel Sanders that he definitely wants back. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts, he acquitted himself pretty well, in my opinion. I think he wasn't also great as a passer, but he didn't take any bad sacks. He was very productive as a rusher. He made do with the terrible pass protection that was given to him, and he made just enough throws, unlike Hill, to get a win in this game. In what was, I guess you could call it a defensive battle, but it was really more like an offensive wet noodle fight. But I thought Jalen played better than Taysom, and to me, that's an indictment on Taysom.
I think it's both, and it's important, again, when we talk about what does a team have in the barn or at its disposal, whether it's in terms of a staff or in terms of the players it has at its disposal. This team is exactly the same team that Carson Wentz has been basically stumbling along with for weeks now. No major changes, no major returns, no major changes in personnel that would make a substantive difference. Hurts made this offense look workable with all the exact same pieces and came out with a win against a team that was, I would say, definitely favored, certainly if Carson had stayed in the lineup. That's a thing, right? A guy in his first start coming in with exactly the same talent beats a team he's not supposed to beat because, look, he made plays. Was he perfect as a passer? No. He's definitely growing as a passer. Did he make some good passes? He certainly did. Had a couple nice ones to Rager. And his running is a game changer. Carson is an incredibly tough runner. He's a good athlete, too, but he's not the runner that Jalen Hurts is. Jalen Hurts had over 100 yards in his first game. Did he run a few times when he should have passed? Yeah. Did he miss some open passes when he went for a shorter pass that he had a longer pass open or something that, again, with a little bit of connection, which he has very probably little of with his receivers because he doesn't get a lot of work with them. Carson's been taking all the first-team reps for quite a while. He looked very efficient. The team rallied to him, and they ended up beating a superior opponent in his first start. That's a big deal. All of those things are a big deal.
And he's only the second quarterback in NFL history to beat a team on a 9+ game win streak in their first start. The last one to do it was Ron Jaworski. It was a hell of a long time ago.
Well, isn't that appropriate?
It's very appropriate, but he didn't make the same mistakes that Carson was making, and the mistakes were what was killing Carson. It was the turnovers, it was the sacks, it was the picks, it was the untimely mental errors that would sink this team because they're not very good, and when you're not very good, you can't afford to make those mistakes because unlike say a team like the Chiefs, you can't dig yourself out of that hole. You're not good enough to do
your
that.
margin is just a lot smaller.
Yes.
And wanted to give a shout out to Miles Sanders. Went for 82 and a TD. We don't typically see runs that long outside of people like Derrick Henry. Miles Sanders has been playing pretty well all year, but that was really impressive. Fit his strengths, got through a hole to the outside, turned it on, beat everybody to the end zone. Quick shout out to Miles Sanders because we haven't said his name very much on the podcast. And then we have a bootleg shot of the week nominee out of this game too. The Josh Sweat strip sack of the aforementioned Taysom Hill came around the left tackle, came off the right edge of the defense, cleared the tackle with his hands, and then hit Taysom real hard in the back and swiped down at the same time, caused the fumble. Eagles recovered. Big play, big impact. Great play by Josh Sweat.
When Sweat was coming out, one of the big things that people talked about was really long frame, and when he's got a runway, he's got really good power. And that sack he had on Teron Armstead, where it was just a long arm move, where it's like, hey, I'm getting my shoulders lower than you, and there's an old kind of defensive line coach term called one arm is longer than two, where is if you're going for a bull rush or if you're going for a stab or anything like that, use your inside arm, use one arm, because you can kind of turn your shoulders and outreach the tackle who's coming in with two hands. One arm is quote unquote longer than two. So he did that on Armstead. He got low, locked out his elbow, drove with his legs and just kind of kept driving, drove him straight into Taysom Hill's lap and finished with a sack. Just phenomenal play. Really showed off his physical talent because Teron Armstead's an elite left tackle in this league. Like, no two bones about it. He's phenomenal. And for you to do that against somebody that quick and that strong like Teron Armstead, it says a lot. So I think Sweat's coming along nicely. I think he's growing into his frame. I think he's growing into his physical ability. And I'm excited to see what he does for the Eagles in the future. I think they got a good one there.
For sure. We could move on to Falcons Chargers, which I saw the Spider-Man meme. If those of you who are not familiar with the meme, is two copies of Spider-Man pointing at each other, and that was Matt Ryan and Justin Herbert, and older Matt Ryan and younger Justin Herbert. But an interesting game, and I want to talk about Russell Gage to the Ridley tight touchdown. This is, again, that's a Falcons wide receiver throwing to another Falcons wide receiver. They actually lined up Matt Ryan at wide receiver, and Gage threw that better than a lot of QBs that I've watched this week. It was a 32-yarder. He threw it over coverage perfectly into the hands of Calvin Ridley. And then came back and made a couple of catches. We've mentioned his name for the last 3 weeks. Gage has been playing very, very well in a loaded Falcons wide receiving core. The fact that he's making any noise at all is pretty notable. And then he comes in and throws a touchdown this week. He's having himself quite an interesting little month here for the Falcons. So keep Russell Gage on your radar. And then a stat came up during the broadcast that I had to sort of rewind and listen to again. The Chargers have given up, this is going to kill you. The Chargers have given up a touchdown, not a field goal, a touchdown in 18 consecutive goal-to-go situations. So that means first and less than 10, they have given up 18 straight touchdowns, not even field goals, in that particular situation. That's crazy talk. Like, that's insane. That needs, in the words of one of my favorite friends from North Carolina, that needs fixed.
How do you not even accidentally get a red zone stop?
How does somebody not self-destruct against you? I don't know. But it definitely, I don't know. It begs the question at the very least. But this was an interception fest at the end. The Chargers threw on, the Falcons threw one right back. But when it counted, Herbert made a play at the end that he had to have to lift the Chargers They do win this game. We've given both of these teams a lot of garbage for being able to lose creatively at the end. The Chargers lost less and ended up with the W, whether or not they wanted it. They tried to hand it back a couple times, but they grudgingly took the win and sent the Falcons back home.
The fact that this game was tied 17-17 at the 2-minute warning, and we knew that we weren't done with interceptions, told you everything you need to know about the Falcons and the Chargers this year. Like, everybody saw that coming. There was no way this game was going to be won by more than 3 points. And there was no way this game was going to have less than 4 turnovers.
No, they're too similar. Well, they have been too similar for pretty much the entire year. So, not a ton to say about that. These teams are both, I think, playing out the string. One's already fired their coach. One's likely to fire their coach. We'll see some changes here.
We have to talk about that special teams disaster the Chargers had
again. I was really going to try and sweep that under the rug this week.
No, we're not doing that. We're not sweeping that. That mess has to be talked about.
All right.
Where they forgot they didn't have a timeout. They left the offense on the field because I don't know if they didn't know what down it was. I don't know if they didn't know they had a timeout. I don't know what the hell it was. They tried to run the field goal unit on late. There's like 20 guys on the field. They snap it and try to kick a field goal. I've never seen that before, where a team just like forgets they don't have a timeout or forgets the down and like I don't know what the hell happened. But only the Chargers can do that this year under Anthony Lynn. Like, it is so Chargers, and it's not even the first time that they've done something like that. They just did it last week. Chargers are unbelievable.
The Chargers and short clock situations, a quote-unquote work in progress, but it's a lot of work and not much progress.
Oh, my God. Only the Chargers,
It's not
man.
pretty. No, it's not pretty. So let's go on to the Colts-Raiders. A one-handed interception. What? So weird this week by Moore. Beautiful play. One of the best of the week. All of them were really pretty, but that one was aggressive and well-timed. Big play. Need to talk about Jonathan Taylor. Ran big all day and picked up the blitz. I talked about this earlier with running backs. Taylor certainly has all the physical capabilities. He is a big dude. Former track star. Ton of speed. Showed both of those things, but ran hard. Ran with speed. And showed power and blitz pickup. So Taylor, again, one of those rookies that started off and was sort of overshadowed by some of his teammates, didn't have the early production. I know that probably led to a lot of fantasy managers, trading him or popping him out of their lineup. If you have him for the stretch run, you're going to feel pretty good because Indy's going to lean on him like they did this week. And again, we had another wide receiver pass. This was Zay Jones on the Raiders side, passing to Nelson Aguilar. It seems like for a while it was always the Browns, right, with the trick plays, and now we've started to see them sprinkled around. The Falcons had theirs, Raiders had theirs. The Raiders, have fallen off, right? They were on a roll. They were taking teams like the Chiefs to the wire. They feel like they fired their defensive coordinator. A couple of game losing streak here. It really feels like the Raiders have lost their shine heading into the end of the season.
A big part of it is because their defense is just not reliable at all. Indy went 8 for 11 on third down. That is a 73% conversion rate on third down, which is astronomical. The Raiders are now the 4th worst third down defense in the league, behind only Tennessee and Carolina. They're tied with Dallas at 30th, I guess you can call it.
Anything that you're tied with Dallas in with defense this year is a bad omen.
50% allowing third down conversions is just nightmarish. Absolutely all. I mean, they're worse than Detroit. They're worse than Seattle. They're worse than the Jets. They're worse than Houston. They're worse than Cincinnati. Like
I was waiting for that. They're worse than Houston? No.
Yeah, that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Like it's a bad third down defense, which is probably why Paul Guenther was fired, because Paul Guenther is a disciple of Mike Zimmer, who never has bad third down defenses. That's why Guenther was hired, was to make this a good third down defense, to be able to get pressure, to be able to protect the middle of the field. They have not been able to do that. Really, ever since they kind of had a decent showing against Mahomes, and by decent, I mean only allowed 30 points, it's kind of been all downhill from there. Jonathan Abram has not developed the way they were hoping as a first-round pick. The pass rush hasn't been great. It was time for a change. They're bringing in Mark Marinelli, who was an assistant, and or not Mark Marinelli, Rod Marinelli, who's now the defensive coordinator, who has a track record as a defensive coordinator and has put together some pretty decent defenses in the past, but can't be worse than it already was because they were one of the worst in the league. So we'll see how that ends up going forward. They're still in the hunt for the playoffs, but they need that defense to step up if they want a chance to make it.
Yeah, right now they seem like a flawed team. Packers-Lions, NFC North tilt. My only note is that Rodgers just makes your margin so small as an opponent because he can make anything on offense look good. Mm-hmm. And people get lulled into the fact of, maybe that guy's pretty good. I give you case in point. Robert Tonyan, who was a player I liked coming out, but really as sort of like a third tight end, has 9 scores this year. Let me repeat that. Robert Tonyan has 9 touchdowns. If you think Robert Tonyan has probably half of that playing anywhere else in the league, you're kidding yourself. The reason Tonyan is sniffing 10 touchdowns, again, double-digit scores, is because he plays with Aaron Rodgers. And that's it.
I mean, this was a tight end offense or tight end friendly offense to begin with, but again, as you said, with Rodgers, any position can be friendly. When you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers who can extend plays, deadly accurate, has the arm to make every single throw, brilliant pre-snap, brilliant post-snap. I guess I could say I'm surprised by this, but I'm really not, because it seems like every single year Rodgers does this. Like, he has some underrated receiver that just goes absolutely off in the red zone. Like, one year it was James Jones getting 14 or 15 touchdowns. Jordy had some years where he just had crazy touchdown numbers. Like, Aaron has his favorites in terms of red zone targets, and it can't all just be Davante Adams, even though Davante Adams is also having a phenomenal year. Like, he's always got that one guy who's his number 2 or his number 3 target in the red zone that he just feeds and feeds and feeds. This year it's Robert Tonyan. He might end up leading tight ends in touchdowns when all's said and done, which is no small feat. But yeah, he's had just a really great year in general. And Davante Adams, who I just mentioned, I mean, every single year he and Rodgers, or not every single year, every single week he and Rodgers make a play that just makes you go, wow. In this game, it was a phenomenal adjustment against stack technique where Rodgers, instead of kind of throwing it high and wide for him to adjust to it back shoulder, he threw it kind of flat and inside, and Davante adjusted under the stack technique from the corner and just kind of cut it off and then took off and ran before the corner could even speed turn and chase him down. Just a monster play, and not really an adjustment you see very often against stack technique. Most quarterbacks and most receivers will just throw that back shoulder and have him stop and turn, but Rodgers trusted Adams to go attack inside when the DB had his eyes turned, and he did. Paid it off with a huge score. And that just kind of speaks to their connection, is the fact they can kind of do unconventional things against certain techniques that DBs use to play, as they say, from the top down, as DB coaches say. You know, if you can attack that in unconventional ways, in ways that a corner does not expect, you're going to get results out of it. And they're one of the few duos, quarterback and receiver, that can do that.
Yeah, we talked about mind meld earlier when we were talking about the Chiefs and Travis Kelce and Hill having that connection with Mahomes. That connection is equally as strong between Rodgers and Adams. Rodgers is playing at an MVP level, and Adams is, not only supporting that effort, but also benefiting from it. And that play was a tremendous example of them being so on the same page that it really left the DBs sort of hung out to dry. As soon as he cut inside, caught that ball, you could see both of them kind of look at each other and they're like, we're not going to catch him. He's going all the way, right? He just broke our angle, both of us, and neither one of us expected it. It was very much that kind of play. It was very long touchdowns. So, Aaron Rodgers, good. Newsflash. Not surprising.
Rodgers good, Lions bad.
Yeah. Not surprising and not surprising. Let's move on to the Vikes and Bucks. So Dalvin Cook and Devontae Adams both have 14 touchdowns this season. I think that's crazy because 14 touchdowns is league leading from a skill position player. And two of those guys play in the NFC North. That's pretty crazy that between the two of them, they have 28 touchdowns this year. Note about the Buccaneers, they, with the whole Antonio Brown experiment, had kind of forgotten about Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller, a guy that is their speed threat, made a ton of noise in the preseason, established a connection very quickly with Tom Brady, which does not always happen with Tom Brady and new receivers. He leaned on him in the early part of the year before Antonio Brown was on the roster, and then he kind of got left out of the game plan, and that's a mistake for Tampa Bay. Scotty Miller had another long touchdown, 51, 52 yards from the ageless Tom Brady, who can uncork 50-yard bombs on a pinpoint, which just doesn't seem fair. Seems like he may have re-upped his deal with the devil. But Scotty Miller makes this offense tick from a deep threat perspective, and if they want to go anywhere down the stretch, they can't forget about Scotty Miller. He makes things happen in that offense. And other than that, the Vikings just kind of wilted on the road late season in Tampa Bay, and they did not put up a ton of points. They ended up with about 14 meaningful points in this game. That's not going to be enough to beat most teams in the NFL. One score per half is, unless you have a phenomenal sort of Chicago-level defense before the last 3 weeks, that's not going to be good enough. Vikings, despite all their prodigious offensive talent, couldn't come up with it, and that doesn't bode for them well, making any noise sort of from this point on.
And the Vikings receiving duo of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen was very quiet. This was a bounce-back game, I think, for the Tampa Bay secondary. The corners were on their shit. Jefferson had 7 targets, but only had 4 catches for less than 40 yards. He had 39 on the day. Only had 2 first downs. Adam Thielen, same thing, was limited to 4 targets, only 3 catches, also 39 yards. So if you're only getting 78 yards out of your top 2 receivers because they're locked down by Carlton Davis and Antoine Winfield got involved as well. They were doubling Jefferson pretty heavily. Like, if your receivers aren't getting open, there's not really a whole lot Kirk can do, to be honest. He didn't have a great day himself, Kirk Cousins, but I think he kind of did the best with what he could. Nobody was getting open. The pressure was great. It was an off day for the offense, to be honest. It was the only thing that was really working was the run game. And I think Tampa, they weren't throwing as much pressure as they normally do in terms of like blitzes. They didn't really want to leave huge voids in the middle of the field for Kirk to throw under pressure to Jefferson, because he's been statistically one of the best quarterbacks in the league against blitzes and under pressure. So I think they just kind of sat back. They played coverage. They doubled Jefferson and they said, go beat us with everybody else. And they couldn't, so they were forced to just run the ball, but that wasn't enough to keep up with Tom Brady in terms of putting points on the board. And they just kind of won that war of attrition. It was a great game plan by the Tampa defense. Kind of a bounce-back game for that staff, a bounce-back game for that secondary. And I think Tampa's taken plenty of lumps this year, especially in primetime games, but they needed this win desperately. I think they needed to remind themselves that they could play a complete team game. And for the first time in a while, they did that.
Yeah, agreed. It was a good look for Tampa Bay. They needed a bounce-back game. So that takes us to Steelers-Bills, last game we're going to talk about. And my notes on this one, Buffalo took a punch or two. This game was even throughout the first, more than half. And then they sort of put their foot down, which is a really good showing by a team late in the season that's looking to be confident at the right time. And they looked that way. When they decided that they were going to kind of step on the accelerator and leave Pittsburgh and start making plays down the stretch, they did so, and it became pretty clear who was going to win the game. It wasn't in question at the end. You made a note about Stephon Diggs, who's been playing pretty well, but what did you want to say about Stephon in this particular game?
There is no DBs on that Steelers roster that can cover him. There's very few DBs in the league, period, that can cover him. But Buffalo, it kind of took them a while to realize, like, we got to feed him the ball because they're not going to stop him. He ended up with 10 catches, a $130, and a touchdown on the day, and it became very clear if it was in man coverage, they were throwing to Stephon. If it was in zone coverage, they were going to block it up with 6 and 7 man protections and wait for Stephon to kind of cross the field, because as soon as they could break that bracket, he was going to be open again. They just had to wait a little bit longer against zone than they do against man, because he gets open almost immediately against man. But like, that was their game plan in the second half, was reminding themselves, like, look, they can't do anything about Stephon Diggs, so we're going to do everything we can to get him the ball. And they did. And once they kind of did that, the offense really opened up. Phenomenal game plan again by Brian Daboll, offensive coordinator of the Bills, who's on the short list for head coaching positions around the league. I think he's one of the best OCs in the league this year. His development of Josh Allen into the monster that he is today is to be commended. Josh Allen himself had another really, really solid day. He's putting together probably not an MVP campaign because Pat Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers exist, but I think he's at least in consideration for Offensive Player of the Year. And at least he should be, in my opinion. One of the best quarterbacks in the league this year by far. And on the other side of the ball, Steelers just couldn't keep up. Deontay Johnson, again, had problems with drops. He's the only player in the league with double digits in drops. He leads the league with 12. And they weren't really, they weren't getting anything else out of any of the other weapons. I don't think they've made a concerted effort to get Chase Claypool the ball in several games now. I'm
glad you brought that up, because his share has dropped precipitously. He was on that stretch where he was up to 10 touchdowns. I don't either, because he was providing them the spark, especially vertically, to make those big plays. We talked about it with the Chiefs, and it was the Steelers' version of that. He was breaking open games down the middle or on the edge, didn't matter. Had a great run of production, and suddenly hit a stretch about 3 weeks ago where his target share and even snap share, not just target share, but he is not on the field as much. And don't know what happened, if he hit his sort of rookie wall or ran afoul of the coaching staff. Have no idea, no intel on that, no inside knowledge. But the bottom line of results is he's been on the field for way less snaps. His snap count and snap share have gone down. And as a result, his target share is basically in the toilet. And the Steelers offense is not as effective as when he was in there. So if they're trying to make some noise here at the end of the season, they need Claypool to come back in a big way and provide them some of those shot plays.
I think a big part of it is Deontay Johnson's a great route runner. He gets open very easily. But the job title is wide receiver, and it's the receiving part he has a problem with. At least Claypool can catch the damn ball. Even if the routes aren't as crisp, even if the separation isn't as great, he catches the ball. I don't, again, this is another problem that Steelers fans have with this coaching staff, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, is they feel like the touch distribution has been way out of whack. In particular with Claypool not getting the ball as much as he should. They've been feeding every other receiver on the roster except for him, and I don't get it. So hopefully they fix that. I think they've already cemented that they're in the playoffs, so we know they're going to be there. The question is if they're even going to have a shot at the first seed now. They probably won't, because they lost this game, and right now they're fighting for the second seed so that they can at least host a playoff game or two. But if they don't get this offense sorted out, man, they could slip even further down, because Cleveland's coming.
Yeah, it could be an early exit for them if they don't get their balance back, because they were in stride in the middle of the season, and they're starting to tail off in the wrong direction right at the wrong time. So hoping for Steelers fans that they get that turned around, because it is a talented team. Again, it's not a team short on talent, really on either side of the ball. But if you're not having all your pieces work together and create the maximum result, you're not going to get through the playoffs, because everybody ups it. That brings us to the bootleg shot of the week summary. We talked about Jeremy Chin with his huge sack and fumble shot on Drew Lock. We talked about Josh Sweat and his strip sack of Taysom Hill. And we talked about Hassan Reddick, same thing, sack and fumble on Daniel Jones off a TE stunt. The two we didn't talk about are offensive players and Zach Pascal, who, yep, that's right, he's a wide receiver, had a monster chip block, if you want to call it that, I'll call it a pancake versus the Raiders. He had an on-rushing linebacker on the edge and was supposed to chip him and knocked him on his can before heading out on his route. Really solid shot there. Shout out to Brandon Thorne for highlighting that one. We will put up his Twitter video of that particular chip by Zach Pascal. And then Cole Kmet, the tight end for the Chicago Bears, fighting for extra yards after screen, bulldozing some of the Texans. This was nominated as the angry run of the week on Good Morning Football, but we are going to nominate it for a bootleg shot of the week as well. Cole Kmet displaying some of that fighting style, knocking over a couple of Texans before being gang tackled. So those are our bootleg shot of the week nominees in summary. What do you got coming out this week? What did you settle on?
So I got Film Room coming out on the Ravens run game, where I'm going to show actual visual aids for everything I talked about when we talked about that Ravens-Browns game with the QB counter bash and the play call sequencing and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to do a whole episode on that because I think it's really, really fascinating and so far damn near unstoppable. Nobody's really found a way to stop it yet. So that should be a good episode. And then the following week, I think, is when I'm going to finally tackle that KC offense and kind of explaining what they do well, what they don't do well, what works against them, and what absolutely does not work against them.
Right, what to stay away from if you don't want to get your hand burned. So I'll be putting out another Bears Over Beers this week. My other co-host, JB, is on his bye week, so I'll be having a special guest on. You're going to want to listen in for that one. His first time on the show. I'm excited to have him and talk about that. Plenty to keep watching for. Plenty for us coming up to keep listening for. So keep it here, and until then, we will talk to you soon.
Later.